No, I'm in. I'm in.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Forbidden Land podcast. I'm here with alleged flamethrower user Livi.
Who alleged that?
I always slander my guests whenever I bring them on in the intro.
Gotta start the episode off with some good accusations.
I don't know. Arsonist seemed like the best one to use in this
I wish I
situation.
was an arsonist.
So I just mentioned to you that I drank an entire energy drink.
Yes.
And it's 7:45. So
I was
yeah.
confronting him about the fact that he drank an 7:45, and I didn't know he had ADD as well as autism, and that would be why.
So
ADD is treated with stimulants, for those who don't know.
So I have had a cold brew, a C4 energy drink, caffeine gummies, and now a Celsius today. That is
Oh my god.
definitely almost double the daily intake of caffeine you should be on.
Why did you do
So this morning, I was delivering food this morning and I hadn't had my cold brew yet. And I notice that when I'm delivering food and I haven't had any caffeine, I space out too much and I'm like a danger on the road as a result. I'm out here like daydreaming while swerving into the curb. Like it's
can't be doing
so
that.
bad. I had a moment last week where it's been getting worse. So like I had a moment last week where I went into IHOP to grab some food for the delivery. And I went to reach for the bag and I just stopped and stood there for like almost a full minute, completely spaced out, realized what was happening. And I was like, oh shit, I'm supposed to like deliver this food.
Yeah.
It's like,
I know. I zone out a lot too.
it's getting worse though for me. Like I'm spacing out really bad nowadays. And I don't know what's going on.
The word that comes to mind is dissociation.
Yeah. That's probably what it is.
Yeah. If you ever want to talk more about dissociation, I am in, because I also really struggle with dissociation. I didn't even know until recently, because like it's one of those things where I definitely assumed it was normal until the internet brought it up, and I went through like the classic phases of like, oh, I probably don't have that. That sounds really extreme. And then like kind of looking into it and be like, okay, maybe I low-key have that. And then continuing to look into it and be like, wait, I actually really have that. And I know the internet has a tendency to make these things sound like less serious than they are, but you know, that's why we just have to be careful as we're learning about them and see how serious they are and like how much we can really relate.
Yeah.
And with dissociation, I think I've used it to cope with autism for like my whole life, and I didn't even know.
Yeah,
I really just thought everyone did that.
Well, I used to be super hesitant to self-diagnose myself, and so for a long time, I used to be like, "Oh no, there's no way I have ADHD. Like I'm just being like lazy or something." Or like, with autism, like I'm like, "Oh, I'm just, all the signs are there, but no, there's no way that I'm autistic." Like
the same, yeah.
the only
I was like, I don't want to take up space in this community.
Yeah,
all that.
the only confirmed diagnosis I've ever been handed down is Tourette syndrome, and so that would be the only one I would ever claim. And
which is really comorbid with autism and ADHD, like
yeah,
really frequently.
I had a friend in high school that has autism, and he has tics that come along with it. And I never connected the dots that it was possible that I also have autism, and that could definitely fuel the fact that I have tics. And
yeah,
and also the thing with ADHD, like now that I have a comprehensive understanding of it, I realize that like the reason why the farther I got into schooling, the worse my grades were getting, the more I wasn't able to do work or anything, like that all stemmed from my ADHD going untreated. And
I know that's the saddest thing looking back, like kind of grieving all the shame you felt as a kid.
Yeah, I used to beat myself up over it. I used to be like, oh, I'm just being like really lazy. I just can't get myself to do this homework, or God, how do I keep letting my grade dip this low, or like stuff like that. Like I've famously said that my without the pandemic, I would have failed my last math class of my senior year, and I probably wouldn't have
Yeah,
graduated.
actually, the
And
same exact thing happened to me. Yeah.
I was like, I just couldn't pay attention in class to pre-calc. I couldn't get the work done. I was failing by the mid-semester. And when the pandemic happened, my teacher emailed me and was like, just do this course and you're good. I'll pass you with like the bare minimum grade you can get. And
Yeah.
so I would be doing math on one screen and watching anime on the other screen in like the early months of the pandemic.
Oh my god.
And I finished it and graduated. But like I've always said, like, honestly, I don't know how to feel about if I wish the pandemic hadn't happened or if I'm glad it did, because a big key factor is that I only graduated because of it happening. It was like the world's largest save of all time.
I know, and the
So,
world's largest L and save in
I
so many different
know.
ways.
In some
Um,
ways, I never got a senior prom and I never got to graduate on the stage. But in other ways, I got to graduate and get a diploma, and I got to meet the people that I met.
yeah, I know. I can't even think about it because it's like everything would be so different. Did you see that meme with the dog sitting in like a river or a lake or something? It's not really a meme, but it says like everything will get better, but it will be different.
Yeah.
That has really helped me recently because like since the pandemic, everybody's so different, everything's so different, and I kind of just have to accept the fact that it's not going to go back, like quote unquote back to normal. Nothing was really ever okay in the first place, but like long COVID has taken a huge toll on everyone's mental health. It actually really frustrates me because a lot of people aren't aware of it,
Yeah.
and it has affected a lot more people than know than know that they actually had it or have it. And a lot of people have talked about how like the vibes have been off since COVID, and like that's a big part of it because part of long COVID is the depression and anxiety. And like I remember when the pandemic first started and we heard about long COVID for the first time.
Oh
And I
yeah.
kind of like a lot of other people thought to myself, like, well, of course you feel more anxious, like there's a worldwide pandemic. But then when it happened to me, like I'm telling you, it is noticeably different. Like it's beyond your normal anxiety reactions to worldwide events. It's like you can feel it in your body, like how different it is and how deep it is. You feel like a wounded animal on a daily basis. You socially isolate, and it's just so frustrating to watch it happen to people. And of course, like that can happen for multiple different reasons, but oftentimes it is long COVID, and they don't know it. And I feel like Cassandra because I try to tell people about it, and people don't believe me or whatever. But
Yeah,
um,
there's a science YouTuber that suddenly stopped making videos, and it's because she got COVID and then got long COVID after, so she's just constantly bedridden. And
yeah,
she
that happened to
like,
me. I was bedridden.
yeah, she like can't stay up long enough without crashing, and so she's just always in bed. And I think her name is like Physics Girl on YouTube.
Poor
And
physics girl.
and yeah, like they did a live stream a few days ago where they like fundraised for her, and like Ian from Smosh was there and all that. Like it's a big thing because she's one of the most
That is
well
actually
known. Yeah, she's like one of the most well known YouTubers to contract something like that.
that's actually comforting for me to hear that they had that fundraiser, and that's a lot of people believing her. Because like from my limited experience, I just get met with so much doubt, and that's true for illness in general. I had mono during my master's program,
Ooh.
and no one believed me. Like especially before I had a diagnosis, because I was like super fatigued all the time. And I'm telling people, like, this is not normal for me. I don't know what's going on. I'm sleeping like 12 hours a day, like 12, 13, and like a night, I mean, whatever. And people would be like, "Oh, are you sure you're not just depressed and stuff like that?" And I'm like, "No, like I can tell this is like physical. Like I'm sick."
Yeah.
And all my professors were just like, "Well, just get the work in." And like
Yeah.
people don't believe you. They think you're just looking for excuses and stuff like that. And that's like a really toxic thing in our culture towards people who are ill. There's this instinct to be like, "Oh, they're just trying to like get out of working or something like that." And it's like, no,
That's what I've been told
they're
before,
actually
yeah.
experiencing something, regardless of if they get a fucking doctor's note. Oh, by the way, what's the cursing
Oh, go nuts, go
policy on this?
nuts.
What?
Go nuts.
Go nuts?
Yeah, it's fine. You can
Okay, cool.
swear as much as you want.
I do want to circle back to the autism thing though, because I wanted to say like it's so bittersweet putting this stuff together because like on one hand it feels so good to be like this is why I'm like this and like it's not my fault and honestly I was right all along because like when you're a kid you have a deep down feeling that like things aren't right
Yeah.
and that like maybe you're being mistreated in some way but you kind of repress it and say like well everyone else seems to be able to deal with this or whatever and like you kind of find a way to get along. So looking back it's like oh my god I was right like this whole time. But then there's also that huge pain of being like I went through so much and I was blaming myself the entire time and I never stood up for myself because I didn't know what was going on.
Yeah, and what made it more complicated for me is that my sister has autism, like diagnosed. And so like the other part of me was always like, oh, I don't want to claim this thing that my sister actually has, and our symptoms were so different from each other.
Yeah.
Like she can't handle loud noises and she's very irritable and prone to like explosive outbursts a lot, which is very common amongst people with autism. But then there's also the other side of the coin where there's social symptoms that she doesn't have. She's super extroverted and loves talking to people. And like a big problem she had growing up was just not eating her food because she'd be too busy yapping at the table.
Aww.
And like I'm the opposite of that. Like I have really bad social skills. I have like every social symptom of autism you could have, and yet I still would deny it growing up, like not realizing that people with autism can have different symptoms depending on what part of the spectrum they're on and whether or not they're introverted or extroverted. And
yes,
so
exactly. That's what also held me back for a long time, like not understanding the diversity of autism because like I'd read the little like list of like common symptoms and stuff, and I'd relate to a lot of them, but some of the main ones that I don't have as much are like the need for routine, not being able to deal with unexpected changes,
yeah.
and what's another one? Repetitiveness is a hard one for me because I actually do have a lot of repetitive behaviors that I didn't realize. But I also get easily annoyed with repetition. And that's another autistic thing, but I am like hypersensitive to repetition and I don't find it comforting most of the time. I find it irritating.
Yeah.
And I have a I forget what is it echolalia? I'm not sure. In my head where like I count a lot. And it actually annoys me so much. Like I'll count or I'll say the word like hello over and over. And it annoys me and I'm like I will literally try like go out of my way to try to get it out of my head.
Those are
because it's annoying.
Those are tics actually. So people can have one or two tics. It's not that rare for people to have an occasional tic, and like with me, I have Tourette's, and then combined with ADHD and OCD, it's like a perfect slurry of just them all feedbacking off each other. And so like my OCD fuels certain tics that I have and like compels me to do them. And then like they just kind of reverb off each other. And that's like the thing with numbers, like you have to counter, you have to say hello in your head, is you're being like compelled almost to do it, and it's kind of out of your control. and it's definitely like the sign of that being just a tick that you might have.
Yeah. The way
I
I had understood it on autistic like online communities is more of like an echolalia thing because I wouldn't say, at least as far as like OCD and it being more like a compulsion, I wouldn't say it feels like that because it definitely doesn't feel like anxious, like anything bad will happen if I don't or like I have to or anything like that. It just like it's just like that repetitive sound in my head that I don't know. I do think it's more like echolalia or maybe like a tic, more so than like a compulsion or something.
yeah. I I hate that I have to describe it like a superpower because it's actually kind of annoying, but I have as a result of OCD, I have an almost photographic perfect memory. And it's one of those things where like my Tourette's will take something from that and just like do that thing where I hear it in my head all the time. And
Yeah.
I'm really good at remembering numbers to an annoying extent. And it
That's
all
so interesting. I'm so the opposite. My memory sucks so bad, but that's the dissociation thing. Like,
yeah, like
but I'm sorry. Go ahead.
oh, if I made a noise just then, by the way, that's probably a tick that I just did. But um like with numbers, I can remember like exact numbers of things, or time is a really big one for me. I can remember when something happens or how long it happened for or how long ago it was, like almost perfectly. And it's so weird how much I obsess over it. Cuz you mentioning like hearing numbers and having to count in your head reminded me of that, where like
Yeah.
Rory will be like, "When did this happen?" And I'll be like, "Exactly 8 months ago around this time of this month." Like it's so strange.
You know, I'll tell you a pattern I've noticed. I've noticed that all my anxiously attached friends have freaky good memories, and all my avoidant friends are really forgetful. And I'm one of those avoidant, forgetful people.
I
I don't know. Comment down below if you can add to that theory.
I
I don't have a big
definitely,
sample size, but that's what I've noticed.
yeah, I don't,
And yeah, I think I've done this thing since I was a kid because my parents didn't help me emotionally regulate, where if I have an emotion that's negative, I treat it like a hot stove in my head. Whatever memory triggers it, I treat it like a hot stove. And if I start thinking about that thing, I'm like, nope, stop, don't think about it. And then it gets to a point where so many memories can cause that stressful feeling that you just don't, you get out of the habit of rehearsing memories, basically.
yeah,
And my inner monologue is most of the time hypothetical conversations with people. I've
same.
realized, like, if I'm in downtime just thinking, usually I'm convincing some kind of anonymous, like, other person of some argument that I'm making in my head. Like, that's my usual downtime,
I've
which
noticed
is
that.
very dialectical and fun, but it's also part of my, like, intellectualizing. I cannot process my emotions. Like, I have to analyze everything in order to feel like I have control, but it doesn't actually process my feelings.
I used to, or I still do it. I don't know why I'm saying I used to. I will have conversations in my head, like hypotheticals, but it's in a podcast setting. So
Yes, I do that a
it's
lot, actually.
and I think I've noted it as being one of the reasons why I think I'm obsessed with doing this podcast now, is that if I don't do this, I'm just gonna do it in my head and it's gonna drive me crazy. Like
Yeah.
there are podcasts that I listen to where I go, God, what would it be like if I went on there as a guest? And I'm like, this is the like weirdest thought process I have, is doing that. And
No, I think that's really valid. Like, that's actually really healthy because, like, all I do is argue with people in my head, and then if anyone actually disagrees with me in real life, I don't say shit, and that is unhealthy.
so I
That's so
actually
unhealthy.
I had to slow down on this podcast a bit. A couple weeks ago, I bulk recorded 3 episodes in a row because there was just so much I wanted to talk about. It was the my review of the Acolyte, it was the Cody Co episode, and then another episode talking about I have to look because I don't at this point I don't even remember what episodes I'm making nowadays. But it's if I can find it, I'm like
There is
speed
nothing
running
wrong with
this.
having a lot to say. I think that's great. And I think it's also useful for you as a content creator because obviously there will also be times when you don't have
Yeah.
anything or aren't in the mood to like talk.
Yeah, that
So
used to be
it's
a
good to
big
have those like
problem.
locked and loaded.
That used to be a big problem for me on the earlier months of this podcast was that I wouldn't prep a doc beforehand and I would be going off the cuff. I'm so bad at it. Like I would run out of stuff to talk about 15 minutes in and I would be rapid firing through it. And then for the rest of the episode I'd be like on Twitter being like, "Oh, this is some crazy news." And it was such a bad episode. And
That's so cool though because you built this skill. Like you just pushed through, kept doing it, and now look at you.
well, so this episode has the most thorough I've ever been writing out a doc. This is the longest topic list I've ever written.
Oh my
And
gosh.
it's
Let's give
because
the people the lore because I didn't really know how this podcast worked. So I messaged Dane because I wasn't sure like how we choose topics or anything. So I was just like, I'm just gonna spit out like some topics that I enjoy talking about. And so that if Dane is like looking for inspo, he can pull from that. And I sent him like 10 like 10 minutes of voice messages being like,
when
so I like to talk about psychology and like blah 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 and just going into stuff. Um so is that part of why you have
so
such an outline?
sort of, yeah. I was driving when you sent me that, and the notifications kept rolling in over like a 15-minute period. And I got to Rory's house and I went, I think she just sent me like an audiobook. I gotta lock in. And so the next morning I popped in my earbuds and just listened to all of them, and I had the doc open, writing at the same time. And some of the topics were mine, and some of them were like ones that we had both come up with coincidentally. A lot of the ones in here are from you. A lot of the ones about leftism are from you, especially because I hadn't really thought about some of those when I was writing it. Like I wrote down leftist
Interesting.
infighting, and I don't think about leftist infighting a lot, but like I have strong opinions on it, so I was like, oh, let's write it down.
Ooh, I am excited to get to that because I'm really conflicted. Most of my opinions on that are coming from what I see on Tumblr and Instagram, which I think is important to have that conversation with the context of like that is so insular and so niche that like we need to remember that that's what that is and like no one else gives a single fuck about that. So
Yeah.
but okay, I do really quick. I'm sorry. We are here. I go with autistic. Is it perseverance or is it actually perseverance? I don't know. Somebody tell me. But basically, going back to talking about autism, um, I just wanted to like finish my thought on that. Is that like when we were like kind of diagnosing ourselves and looking at the symptom list and stuff like that, and finding these things that didn't seem to fit, um, but then eventually like looking into the community and just seeing
Yeah.
the diversity that was there and how differently everything can present. And now it's just so funny looking back because it's so obvious. Like
I know.
once I did start putting it together, I was like, oh my god, so many signs are there. Like I was friends with, or I easily got along with people who were more, like you said, more like diagnosed autistic when we were in like high school. And I
Yeah.
always felt like people were too mean to them. And I always was able to talk to them really well. And I always wondered to myself, I'm like, why am I so good with autistic? You know, come to find out, there's a reason. And I've always been friends with people who are also autistic, come to realize later in life. So, you know, I guess however you would describe like someone who might have been considered subclinical back in like the day, but now maybe more
Yeah.
considered actually autistic. And then growing up, I like couldn't handle soda because the bubbles were overstimulating to me. And I did a lot of like stereotypical stuff as a kid that I
Yeah.
just learned to mask when I got older. But looking back, it's like, how did no one? It's so crazy. I
uh,
have a whole doc on Google Docs called "Oh, That Was Autism," and it's just a list of everything in my life that's explained by autism. I'm
That's
face
awesome.
blind. I have navigation difficulties. Like, there's so much.
I'm also a little face blind. Um,
It People get so mean about it.
and so a big thing for me was other people telling me I exhibit symptoms of autism. That was like the biggest giveaway to me, was when other people noticed it. And a big one that tipped everyone off was when one day we were eating at a restaurant, and when I used to eat burgers, I would always get them plain. Like, only, like, the most I would put on there is like cheese. And I would never
Mhm.
put sauce on it. If I wanted to get sauce, I would put it on the side and dip the burger, which was seen as weird to people. I only like sauces that have the consistency of barbecue sauce. I hate stuff uh, like stuff like the consistency of like Chick-fil-A sauce. I hate that. I don't like the
If the
consistency
sauce
of
is
it.
too watery, I'm the same way. I'm so triggered by
Yeah.
that.
And yeah, I just don't like it. And the reason why I always got my stuff plain is because I'm not a big fan of vegetables, and I couldn't articulate it very well. So I was like, I don't like the crunch. And people would be like, "What do you mean?" And I'm like, something about the texture of like onions. I couldn't stand it. They're like, the way that they crunch and the way that they sound grosses me out, and like
Yeah, I was a picky
the
eater growing up too, and it's like
yeah,
it's so obvious.
and like the acidic taste freaks me out. And like, I think the most progress I've made is being able to eat grilled onions and like grilled peppers that are put on like tacos and stuff. That's the most progress I've been able to make with that. Or like peppers that are on
Mhm.
pizza. But I've been told that I don't like the texture because, and I used to also separate my food when I was a kid too. I
I did
hated
that
it when food
too.
would touch. And so I've heard that those are big signs that I have like sensory issues, which is a symptom of autism. And
Yes. Yeah, I had
so
all of that. I hated any sauce when I was a kid. And I also separated my food. Look at us.
I also have sensory
Figuring it out.
overload when people touch me. That's another thing. I can't like I can't handle it when like people touch my skin. Like if they touch my clothes, it's whatever. If they like touch my skin and it's not like my hands, I freak out. Like I can't handle it.
Yeah.
If someone were to like put their hand on my shoulder, it would I would get like shivers and it would make my skin crawl. Um,
Yeah, that's another sign. And looking back, it's like we just wrote all these things off as quirks. One of mine was I didn't like to sit across from people because one of my strongest like autistic traits is the eye contact
yeah,
thing,
same. I
which
can't make eye
is
contact.
so it's so funny because I have like literally poems about it from high school being like people's blank stares drown out the words that they're saying and stuff like that. And I'm like, how did I not know I was autistic? That is so obvious.
When we went to
And I
that
would,
bar,
if
did
I
you?
was on a date with someone, I would be like, hey, could I sit next to you? It's just like a fun little quirk about me that I don't like, looking in someone's eyes and like sitting across.
When we went to that bar, did you notice that I wouldn't make eye contact with anybody?
Which bar? Oh, no, I didn't. Because I also don't look at people, which
Yeah.
actually, okay, this is something interesting to talk about autism is that it's a stereotype that we don't have empathy, but we do have major fucking empathy. And the problem is it's treat others as you would like to be treated.
Yeah.
And how I would like to be treated is not being stared at. So, like, out of
Same.
empathy, I don't look at people a lot because I think it's just polite and I don't realize that people look at me. So I feel like sometimes I like act weird in public because I'm thinking, who would look at me? That's so rude.
Yeah, I've started going to the gym, and that's such a big problem is people like I don't think they know, like I don't think they realize it, but they'll be staring at me, but they're in the gym and we're all hot and sweaty and we're all exhausted. And so we all have that like resting I want to kill you face, and it looks super judgmental. And like it looks super judgmental, and it always makes me like so uncomfortable when people are looking at me like that in the gym. And
Yeah, that's
it's
actually part of why I don't go to the gym.
one thing I've noticed is that if I take off my glasses, it's like a sensory deprivation thing. Like if I take off my glasses, I can't see anymore around me. So I don't notice when people do that. And it kind of like shuts me out from the people around me, and it makes me feel a little bit more comfortable at the gym. That, and then like I'll pop in earbuds so I can't hear anyone either.
Yes, it's actually been great for that reason, like realizing that we're autistic because we can accommodate ourselves better. And like I've noticed that knowing about how I get overstimulated has helped me prevent it like so much more. Because before I knew I was autistic and I would just like raw dog life, I would get so overstimulated and end up crying like a lot of the time and not
Yeah.
know why. And now I'll be like, wait, there's like overlapping noises. I can put my headphones on. And like, it really helps me in my day to day life. Like, just knowing that I can accommodate myself sometimes.
Who knew
And
that?
I allow myself to not look at people's eyes like way more now because I used to force myself all the time.
Same.
And I feel so free. Although with my new job, I've been masking a lot more. And
Yeah.
literally, my first HR meeting was autistic nightmare. Like, the room that we were in, signing like paperwork and stuff, small, insanely brightly lit,
Oh, I hate
one
'em.
table, me and homegirl facing each other, single chairs facing each other across this table. She's staring me down the entire time. I couldn't tell you a single word that was said during that meeting because like my entire fight or flight was activated. And it's so funny because it's a mental health position. How do y'all not have an autistic friendly like process? That's so wild.
Yeah, I felt that way when I went into a job interview. They took me into like a fluorescently lit small room in the back of the building, and I was so uncomfortable. I think that's one of my problems, is that in a job interview I kind of choke it because I freeze up and I get really tense. And they'll ask me like, and but also at the same time, like I feel like I let my morals get in the way of just lying in a job interview too much, because like they'll be like, what's your 5-year plan? And I struggle with that question because in my head I'm like, you think I'm gonna be here in 5 fucking years? No way am I gonna be here in 5 years. But they don't know that, and I'm supposed to like lie and be like, oh, I'm gonna love this place and I'm gonna be here for the rest of my life. No, I'm not.
I know.
I struggle with that
I
so
feel
much.
like they know that too. Like, how can
Yeah.
they not know that?
There's no way they
And
don't
it's just, like,
know.
we're just lying to each other. Like, is this what
Yeah.
neurotypicals do all
Like-
day? Just lie to each other?
Like they're making like 13 an hour at the most doing what they're doing as like a hiring manager. There's no way they see themselves still there in 5 years. Like,
I know. A lot of job interviews feel like just proving that you're not autistic. Like it feels like that's the point.
that does kind of feel that way. I felt that way. I feel that way during like the pre-interview assessments that they do when you're applying, where they're like,
Mhm.
and I've had to get over this, where I think about the question too much and I answer too honestly. And I've learned that I should just keep like lying on these things and being like, I'm gonna love this place, and yes, I'll kiss the customer if they ask me to. Like, like
I actually have the opposite problem from you where I lie too much. And I tried to apply for like a flight attendant position or something, and I lied on like every single question, being like, I'm the friendliest person ever. And I think I like quote unquote failed the personality test because like
It
I
was
think
too
they have
perfect.
some like lie detection questions
yeah.
that they, have psychologists figure out or whatever. And I probably failed that aspect of it because I straight up lie the entire time.
I've noticed
And
that
during
they
the interview,
will.
I lie, and
Yeah,
I mean, I'm high masking, so yeah.
I've noticed that they'll ask the same questions on like page 1 and then like page 4 of the questionnaire. It'll be like a question you've already answered, and if your answer is consistent, then you're telling the truth. But like if you're like, oh shit, I don't remember what I said on this question, and you answer a different way, it kind of shows a little bit of inconsistency. There was one I did recently where they asked the same question like 9 times, and at a certain point I was like, this is really pissing me off. Like, and it made me better at answering the question, where I was able to remember what I said. because they asked it so much. I was like, yes, I do know what I would do if a coworker like couldn't get their job done on time and I needed to take away from what I was doing and help them. Like, I do know now what I would do. And I think what it also is that the job I was doing before was so unorthodox that stuff I got away with there's no way I could get away with it in a normal corporate job. Like,
Yeah.
I could take my lunch break whenever I wanted. I could listen to like YouTube videos on the job. I drove a forklift way outside of OSHA regulation where I worked. Like, there's no way I could.
To a crime on pod.
Hey, I would have gotten fired if I didn't do that, so it's their fault, not mine. That was the argument I always made, was that if they ever want to question me on why I never wore a seatbelt and never had a flagger, if I didn't unload this truck in under 5 minutes, I would get yelled at and then likely fired because I was too inefficient as an employee.
Yeah.
So
that workplace was wild. They need, I don't know.
They need an OSHA investigation.
Literally.
I had a theory that the building was giving people cancer. So now that I've said that, I really can't ever say where I used to work without getting sued for defamation. But let's just say the building used to be a Lockheed Martin nuclear aircraft facility, and 30 years later it became what it was, a company that sold a certain thing. And I worked there, and the one of the guys that does inspections got cancer 3 times. He currently has it and is probably going to die from it. And he's also my godfather. My manager has had cancer twice. The receptionist has had cancer. So let's just say it might be going around.
Purifying, Dane. You better take some antioxidants.
I thought about taking a Geiger counter in there once and like seeing what was in that building, because I used to tell the owner, like, this used to hold nuclear aircraft parts in here, right? And I could tell after a while it started freaking them out, because I think they realized what I was implying.
Oh my god, and like they definitely didn't do the right testing they probably should have done to make sure it was like safe for human occupation.
They would have occupied that building in the 60s during the Vietnam War. There's no way they would have been checking for nuclear like waste being left behind.
That's terrifying.
This is the same government that created birth defects in a part of the world that we had no business being in. So there's no way.
This is the same government that's done a lot of shit.
Oh yeah. Illegal human experimentation, like the list goes on. So
don't trust the government.
Oh, for sure. So, which me saying for sure kind of conflicts with my ideology, but it's whatever. I don't trust the current government. Speaking of government, I am going to shift the topic just a little bit. This morning, this will be old news by the time this comes out, but this morning, the vice president pick was announced.
Who is it?
It's the governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz. And he's super popular within the progressive movement. Way more popular than Governor Shapiro, which, yikes to that guy. He was a horrible pick if she had actually gone with him.
That might have actually been a good move on her part.
Yeah.
Do you know if they've changed her stance on like Palestinian liberation?
So I know that she's the highest executive branch official that has acknowledged the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, like due to like hunger and all that, like humanitarian aid not being able to get in. I know that when she was in the Senate, she voted no on sending weapons to Israel. She was one of 22 senators to do that. But I don't know how much that really means, because like Democrats are like basically third world Maoist when there's a Republican president. So I'll take that with a grain of salt.
Right. I'm thinking what I might do is email my representative, not to sound like a liberal, but I think we probably all do need to do that at least, just to be like, hey, I'm not gonna vote for the Democratic Party if y'all don't like oppose the genocide, like actively
Yeah.
oppose it. For me, it's not something I'm willing to compromise on. Like that's so many. This is a genocide. Like it's not like this small issue that you can just be like, well,
Yeah.
I gotta vote blue no matter who. Like for me, this is something that I cannot vote for someone who is not opposing this genocide. Like,
Yeah.
and I think I'm just gonna tell my representative that. And I mean, I don't know. I need to do more research, but like if the Democratic Party opposed the genocide, I could see myself doing it. I need to get more involved though, because I know like just voting is not enough.
So my friend John, he comes on here a lot and we talk about politics, and he started coming on here when I think the death toll in Gaza had gotten up to about 8,000 by that point. And we've talked about it a lot. He lives in Texas now, and he has started to try to get into some of the protests and stuff like that. So I would say watch out for anything that's happening in Atlanta, because, and I'm open that I live in Georgia, by the way. I just don't say where.
Okay.
But I know Atlanta organizes stuff a lot, and
Yeah, I have seen it. I've seen PSL put on some stuff, and
yeah,
I've had like spotty experience with PSL. Atlanta. Yeah.
PSL doesn't
It's
have the
really sad
best
because I
track
guess this does
record.
kind of get into the leftist infighting thing, but um, as someone who is really passionate about like being against hierarchy and like any kind of social hierarchy, um, but also someone who knows that like regardless of leftist differences, like we're kind of just a minority in general and we don't really need to focus on that stuff. I was looking into PSL and I went and I guess kind of tried to join. First, I met up with a guy. They have like scouting people or whatever, I
Yeah.
guess, kind of. But like I talked to, and he was great, very knowledgeable. We were able to bond. We agreed on most things. But then I met with him and the person who was like above him, which
Oh
already
yeah.
bothers me as someone who doesn't like hierarchy.
Hierarchy.
But so I show up and she was so mean. But okay, here's the thing. I know that you shouldn't base everything on whether or not she was mean, but her whole attitude was very like squashing any like difference of opinion from hers, and I literally like went nonverbal the whole time I was there because like when she started going off about like why all her opinions are right and why anarchists are wrong, and like she got really angry with me, and I was like, I don't know if I can be a part of an organization that wants to squash like differing opinions from theirs like
Dissonance.
so I don't know. It was
Yeah.
very it was a very negative experience. And then when I went to like some of their protests and stuff, and they're very like cult like
Yeah.
in the way they put certain people on pedestals, like, and I just don't believe in worshiping anybody, like regardless of who they are.
Yeah.
You can give people credit and respect them for what they've done, but like chanting their name and stuff like that is kind of where I like draw the line. And so I'm like, I just don't know if this is what I'm about. But
Another flaw with parties like that. So I've never really heard anything great about PSL, unfortunately. But I am aware of their existence. And the unfortunate thing about parties like that is that I've found that in a lot of cases they're very naive, which is very weird, right? Like people being that knowledgeable on the way that this country is so corrupt and how it's ruled by the two-party system, unlike other countries which have multiple parties, like Canada, England, France. All of those places have like a multi-party system with some parties having similar ideologies, some parties not. With them being aware of that fact, I've always found it very strange that they will immediately throw up a presidential candidate, but
yeah.
but they won't attempt to take any like local office or any state office And I've
Mm,
seen that critique a lot where people will make fun of it being like leftists when they think that they can just upend the entire two-party system on a federal level overnight. And
that's a really good point.
yeah, I'm like, let's take a Senate seat first or a House
Hmm.
seat and then grow that, take a few states here and there, then we expand federally. Like, there's a reason why the Libertarian Party, despite being well known, has like no political power in this country. Like, other than having a few seats here and there. Same with the Green Party. Like, you know of them, but they don't have any seats anywhere. And like, even RFK's like independent party, like that, all he's doing is just ripping away votes from the Republican Party. So
Hmm.
in a way, it's like, I wish these movements would be like, we're going to run a member for the House in this district that is traditionally blue, but we know it can go more progressive. Um,
Right. I'm glad
and
you brought that up because I've also been. I'm sorry, you can finish.
no, it's okay. I was pretty much done, but that's kind of my view
um,
on it.
yeah, no, I am glad you said that because I have been kind of thinking that, like on Tumblr, I've been scrolling around, seeing people talk about like, for so long, leftists have known that the way the system is corrupt. It's completely based on violence from the beginning. It's genocidal. It's imperialistic. Like nothing about it is good.
Yeah.
It's irredeemable, and like I've always believed that. Well, I say, well, you know what I mean. Ever since I became politically aware, I believed that. And but at the same time, I think as radicals and as progressives, we have to understand that we are a small minority of the population,
Yeah.
and most people don't think this way. It's unrealistic to expect that amount of change to happen overnight, especially when the majority of people are not thinking that way yet. And the best thing for us to do, at its core, it's an ideological problem. Like we need people to start thinking, like questioning authority, questioning like why does a CEO get all of my paycheck? Why does my landlord get all of my paycheck? Like
I
questioning
love
these things.
I love
Go
explaining
ahead.
to people, like, I've asked people before. I'm like, so what justifies your boss getting the amount of money that they get? And people will be like, well, they lead the company. And I go, well, what do they do? And they're like, well, they, and then all it boils down to is they hired people to do the job for them, and then they are the name that like has to answer for things when something goes wrong, but they don't do any of the labor. And
Right.
I I I'm waiting for a day where that starts to break through to people that like look at small businesses, how it's someone who started the business, brought in people that they will usually just split the profit with, and they're all on about equal footing. They all have equal say in what happens in the company. And then like look at how well that works. And
Hmm.
but I have really controversial opinions on that. Um, I've said before that I only think co-op businesses work on a small scale, and that the answer for larger businesses is unionization. I've always said that having a democratic large company won't work very well. It's either we have all small businesses or we have the same system we have now, but with co-op small businesses and unionized corporations. I would
Yes.
prefer all small businesses, but I don't know how sustainable that is with as large of a population as we have. And I think it
It's one of
also,
those things where it's not realistic soon. Kind of like how
yeah,
I'm saying, like us being a niche, like political sector, like that is the kind of thing that would be so far in the future. But like for I don't know, that is hard to think about. I'm not the most like adept at thinking of these large scale political like economic solutions. But I think like low key, okay, my unofficial feeling about that is that um Okay, locally producing things is the most sustainable way to do it. The way that Native Americans were living, like using the land in the way that it was meant to be used, kind of a bad way to put it, but you know what I mean? Like,
But no Walmart.
but no Walmart. And just like, yeah, they were living in a way where it's like using the native plants and native everything to live their lifestyle. And they had a lifestyle that fit their geographic location. We just took living in Britain and spread it around the world forcibly and like
Pretty
just
much.
forced like all our plants and all our like whatever into every corner of the world,
Yeah.
which is so unnatural and violent. And I think that in I don't know, in my opinion, like I guess the best way I don't know, this may be controversial and it's one of those things I am willing to like reconsider over time for sure. But I think we need to scale back like the way we live a little bit to where we're living with a little bit less stuff. We're living with a little bit less maybe like modern convenient technology kind of things. And we're living a little bit more in touch with our geographical location and like building houses the way they used to build them here. You know, like there are a lot of ways to build houses that cool a house like naturally, that they use in more like desert locations and stuff like that. And I just think every geographical location doesn't need to have like British style houses. And they actually get moldy like
Yeah.
really easily in like South Florida, South Georgia and Florida and all that.
Oh yeah.
And like they're not meant to be everywhere like this. And I just think like local living according to like your local um, you know, climate and all that would be the way to go in my opinion. But like I guess then you get back to like trading and like all that. So how much am I just like regressing for no reason? So that's these are the things we have to think about.
Have you ever heard of Earth Overshoot Day?
Mm-mm.
That is a day that is selected each year when the Earth surpasses the amount of resources used that it can no longer regenerate. So, America is the biggest culprit of this. We have a large overconsumption problem. We produce so much food that we could feed the entire world like 5 times over, but we waste all of it and throw it all away. Earth Overshoot Day is the day where once we reach that point, we have used so many resources up to this point in the year that we are like kind of in like overtime. We're using more than the Earth can regenerate. So Overshoot Day this year was August 1st. Last year it was August 2nd. And it gets like pushed every year. I believe in 1971 it was on December 25th. So it's like once we go past that day, it's like we've now basically overshot how much the Earth can regenerate in this period of time.
Oh my god.
That's how much we're consuming. Like we are going to run out of resources eventually because of this.
To me, it's like just such a colonizer way of being to like continually force the earth into these things that it doesn't want to do. Like, you know, the Native Americans just took the way that the earth was already kind of functioning and helped it along and like put, you know, the seeds in the right places and like saw the way that nature worked and the way that it like helped itself and helped them and just like encouraged what was already there to like be the most successful. But then colonizers are like, why don't we kill everything and grow one crop?
Right?
You know? And like that's such a psychotic way to be. Like just grow what is already growing there and use what's already growing there. You know, and I don't know, it's like such a forceful way of living that I think if people could get back in touch with like a kind of gentleness, none of this would happen. We've been so desensitized to the way we live. Even like waste, like I've always felt kind of weird about waste. Like, where is it going? There's so much of it. There's all this plastic that I'm putting in the trash and then never seeing again. But because everyone else does it, we're like, oh, it must be fine. It's
Yeah.
so not. Like, it's really bad. And like, I don't know, I think we just become so desensitized because it's all so normalized. Same with like turf lawns. Like, that's not a normal thing to do. It was
Yeah.
a way to show like your wealth and that you didn't need to farm, and we spread it all over the world for what? Like, in places where that grass does not grow, um, in places where it doesn't make sense, we're killing habitats of many different animals. We've already stolen this land that belonged to someone else that someone else was cultivating, and
Hmm.
now we've planted all these tiny little grasses on it to show how rich we are.
I
But
wonder
then
what other
everyone
country
does
had that
it.
idea.
But then everyone does it and we normalize it and we're like, oh,
Yeah.
that's just what it looks like. And then we wonder why we feel like creeped out in these like Edward Scissorhands-esque neighborhoods we've created
I was
that
gonna talk about that, yeah.
they
Um,
terrify me.
I absolutely hate when new construction pops up and they wipe the whole area out. There's
No.
there's subdivisions where there's just no trees, and I'm like, why? Like, I have neighbors that when I moved here, our street was like covered in trees. It looks beautiful in the spring and summertime on the road that I live on, but only about half of the road now looks like that still. The other half on my side, like, we still have the trees in our yard. My neighbor cut down his tree a few years ago. My other neighbors have started butchering their trees. And so there's just these like yards where I can see every house down the road. And
Yeah.
there's it's made it really hard to go on walks during the summertime because there's no shade. And like, it just looks gross. I don't understand.
Yeah.
Like I
I've
get it
been
if it's
thinking
gonna
about that.
I get it if it's gonna destroy your driveway, but like, replant a tree then.
A single
And
tree.
I had a neighbor that did cut down their tree and replanted it, and then a few years later got rid of the new tree, and it was barely even like grown.
Oh my god.
I'm like, what was the
Classic.
point?
What was the point? Yeah, I have been thinking about that a lot recently, like how ugly late capitalism is. I know we all like make jokes about it, like, we stole Native American land to do what? Like, put in multiple Walmarts and McDonald's, and it just looks awful. And now, obviously, the ugliness of it is not the biggest sin of it at all.
This area
But
would
I
look
have
great
been
with a
thinking
Carl's
about that. Like,
Jr.
every single area is so. It just feels. I don't want to say hostile because that's like a little stronger than what I'm looking for, but it feels like unsettling. Like, it doesn't feel human. Like, nothing feels right. Everything feels cold. And the thing that's really sad about that is that I know human beings want to create warm, friendly spaces that are beautiful to them. And we have throughout history. Like, we've always done that. And it's been such an expression of just like joy and like love for everyone in your community. And, or, obviously sometimes it's been domination and sometimes it's been forced, but at other times it's been people just like loving each other and wanting to live in a beautiful space with like detailed things and having the time to do that, like having the time to use your creativity to create like a really beautiful shelf or something, like create a really beautiful
But
door.
where's the profit incentive?
Where's the profit incentive to make really beautiful detailed things?
Why are you breathing without making a profit off of it?
Right. I know. It makes me sad because, like, if I had free time and, like, the resources, I would beautify a lot of spaces. Like, I know that's something I would do. It's something I've always done.
Yeah.
Like, places I've gone. Like, when I went to college, I planted a garden. And, like, everywhere I've gone, I've wanted to, like, add beauty to it. And everyone does different shit for their community. But I'm like, man, if we had time and resources, like, I would beautify every little spot. And even like here, like I'll go to a coffee shop or something and be like, man, if I had time, I would plant a garden out here for them. Just to
Yeah.
have beauty. Like, don't even have to pay me, just to have beauty.
Yeah, there's nothing uglier than an Amazon warehouse.
I know it.
It's so gross.
Um,
It's just a big concrete block.
I know. It's so many buildings like that now too. By the way, I do want to circle back to what you were saying about like just bringing up little things to people, like challenging their belief in capitalism in small ways. I
Yeah.
think that is the heart of the revolution. Like, I really do. And like, I think it's important that when we talk about like quote unquote the revolution, we realize that it's not just this amazing thing that's going to happen one day that we kind of have to sit around and twiddle our thumbs until it happens. Like, it's now. It's now, and we need to be responsible for each other. We need to be helping this ideological change happen. And exactly what you said, I think, is like one of the best things anyone can be doing right now, because the main reason we don't have a lot of power as leftists is how small we are, and how honestly leftists do have a lot of problems, and we have a lot of like shaming people who are
Yeah.
outside of the group and even people who are inside the group too. And I think the best thing we can do is exactly what you were saying. And like, I was doing that in my job today, where there was a pregnant lady I was talking to who's on my team who was like, yeah, I tried talking to my supervisor about like having less hours because I'm like really tired because she's growing a whole human being,
Yeah.
and like they won't let her reduce her hours, and I'm like, that is horrible.
That's
I was
insane.
like, dude, you need to, that's like a human rights violation. Like, so just like encouraging people to stand up for themselves and have self-respect and telling them you do deserve better, I think that makes a huge difference over time, like just validating that. Because one of the main things that needs to be unlearned for anything to change is the Protestant work ethic and kind of this whole culture of shame around like individual choices rather than seeing people more as a part of the general cause and effect,
Yeah.
where people's behaviors are affected by things. Like, you're not just like out of the blue supposed to willpower your way into perfect behavior. Like, there's reasons why you may feel lazy or something, and we're figuring that out now. Like, that everyone has different mental health issues, and like there's reasons for it, and like you don't necessarily need to blame yourself, because the ruling class uses that blame as the tool to be like, that's why you're poor, you did it to yourself. And
Yeah.
realizing like, no, actually we are allowed to say I'm a victim. There's no taboo. There shouldn't be a taboo on saying like, you know I am a victim of certain circumstances, because people are, and you should be able to identify that and be honest about it. It's like saying the peasants during feudalism, like, it's your fault because you're sinning.
Yeah.
If maybe if
And
you had a perfect soul, you would be born into the king's body because
yeah,
that's like what they believed or something like that.
and they're like
You guys are
they're like
trying to, it's like,
how what?
sorry, what was the word I'm looking for? It's like medieval. But yeah, go ahead.
It's like when they're like, how dare you criticize the king, he's divine, like he's ordained by God. Like that's kind of the
Exactly. And like, you're a dirty peasant because you're a sinner. Like, that's why you're poor. Like, that's the kind of shit they're saying now.
yeah,
And
the
if people can unlearn that, like, that's so major. And so I'm always trying to tell people, like, you're not lazy. You deserve rest. You're a human being. You get tired. Like, none of this is your fault. And like, you deserve more.
one thing that's interesting is like they'll do the divine thing here, but they'll frame it as, oh, these people are jobs providers. Like, why do you want to tax them?
Yes.
They're giving you a job, and it's like they're not
They're not
personally
giving you
funding.
shit. They're
Yeah,
literally taking from me.
they're not personally footing the bill on the jobs they're creating, and they will never meet me and they'll never know my name. They probably barely think about the business. Like, that's just not how
I'm
it
giving
works.
them labor. I'm giving
Exactly.
them labor that's giving them profit. Like, they're not giving me barely anything, and I'm giving them more than they're giving me by definition of what a business is.
Um, one of the tools I use to convert people, and it was on accident when I started doing this. Nowadays, I'm a little bit more purposeful with it. Is people that I know who are either like liberals or conservatives who aren't very keen on like progressive views. We all grew up in the American education system, and you get a very sugar coated, abridged version of history. And especially with modern history, you don't hear about it a whole lot, which it's because the excuse they give is like, well, it's so new and whatnot. And I'm like, yeah, but like, why is 9/11 not even in my textbook? Like that happened like 20 years ago. and,
Whoa,
and they have
that's
like,
wild.
yeah, and they have like no answer for it. And like I was hearing a couple of years ago, they're just now putting Obama in textbooks. And I'm like, that's insane to me. Like, he hasn't been president since 2016, and they're just now putting him in textbooks. And one of the things I use as a tool to get people more on board with my ideology is that I'll be like they'll bring up like something about history, and I'll go, hey, did you know? And I tell them something about history, but the actual version of it. And they'll go, whoa, are you serious? Like, somebody was talking about the clothing store, which I don't know why they would name themselves this, Banana Republic.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, hey, did you know what a Banana Republic actually is? And they'll be like, no. And I explain it to them where banana companies lobbied the government to send the military into these Latin American countries and stage a coup pretty much. So then the government was beholden to the banana corporations and would allow them to do whatever they wanted in order to grow bananas at a cheap price to turn a larger profit. And
that'll radicalize your friend.
well, yeah, like the countries they would coup became known as banana republics. And a lot of countries in Latin America nowadays where the Republicans are like these communist failed states that we should totally go in and fix their problems. Like those countries are the way that they are because of us. And
right.
They won't ever admit that because these are things that have been like declassified over time that get like quietly declassified and released into the public and never like there's never a light shined on it, because if it was, you'd be like, oh my God. It's like the private phone conversations between Reagan and Nixon during the Reagan administration talking about the drug war, where Reagan is like calling minorities like racial slurs or calling them like names that would typically be associated with certain minority groups, and then being like basically admitting why the drug war exists. Like there's a top advisor from the Nixon administration that has gone on record saying that they targeted weed because Vietnam protesters liked smoking it, and the black population predominantly liked smoking it as well. And that if they made it illegal and then over-policed black neighborhoods, they could jail minority groups more and squash Vietnam protests, and then they get their free prison labor as prescribed under the 13th Amendment.
Right. And that's why it's so helpful to talk about these things to people, because, like, to me, the other thing is, like, weed is so obviously not moral. It's not morally wrong.
Yeah.
And the fact that they try to convince people that it is, like, who is it hurting? Like, if you think for yourself for, like, 5 seconds, you can realize that, like, there clearly was another motivation to that, because there's nothing wrong with doing that.
Yeah.
It's a medicine. There's so many other things that we consume daily that affect our bodies just as much, if not more, such as caffeine, which actually has like a major effect on you, including like your sleep and stuff like that. And it's completely legal, and it changes your mindset, changes a lot of stuff. And, the fact that they target a drug, which we consume drugs every day.
Yeah.
As being something like a moral issue, like it bothers me so much that they got that in people's heads, because like I don't know, and that's why I just want people to like think for themselves. That's what it really is, because like that is part of what bothers me about PSL is like they always kind of have this attitude of like, we're gonna educate the working class and we're gonna like tell them what's right and stuff like that, and it's like, who says you know better than anyone else? I'm like, I just want people to be able to think for themselves and not consume all this propaganda. It's so scary. Like the way people just like, I don't know, like take what Fox News says and are so ready to be afraid of each other. Like people are so ready to like be mad at each other and afraid of each other. And I'm like, when are we gonna realize we're all on the same team?
Yeah.
We all want to like have a good day. Like everyone on this planet doesn't want to, we just want to have a good day. And like it's not about like going out and hurting each other, and like we just vilify each other, and like, it just seems so obvious, like ultimately. But people are ready. People are ready to hear all this bullshit. I don't know.
One part of the drug war that I like bringing up with people is the sentencing differences between crack and cocaine. And it is basically that one demographic of people, rich whites, would use one version of the drug, whilst poorer black communities would use the other version, predominantly based on statistics. And the Nixon administration knew this, so they made it where the sentencing disparity between the two was that if you were sentenced for having, I believe it was if you had crack, you would get a higher sentence than you would if you had the same amount of powder cocaine. Because they knew that, well, a lot of the rich elite, white people in this country, will use the powder stuff. And it's been shown in data that poorer black communities will use crack. And also the Reagan administration used to like bust crack into black neighborhoods in order to increase those conviction rates.
Wild. Wild.
And I'm about to be a Republican's worst nightmare. Ever since they've brought up critical race theory, I've actually researched it. And it's such a valid theory because it takes the idea that race is a social construct and argues that, at least in America, it's very much a legal construct as well, where in order for capitalism to function, there has to be a permanent underclass. And the easiest way to create that is to pick a demographic and pit it against another demographic. And when the majority of people in this country are white, the easiest solution would be to take the minority groups. In this case, usually it's the black communities. They use them as an example where, like, I think in critical race theory, they mentioned the Dred Scott decision, the Supreme Court ruling that a certain race is a lower class of people than another race, where they argued that black people in this country don't have any legal rights that white people have. And that was their decision on the highest court in the land. Because Dred Scott, like, I want to get the details right. Someone sued a white slave owner, and the Supreme Court made the decision that he can't sue because he's black, and black people don't have the rights to sue white people, pretty much. And it was a monumental decision that lasted for decades. It was pretty much like the foundation to why slavery persisted for so long, and is, I think, credited with the beginning of the domino effect that would lead to the Civil War and the eventual quote-unquote abolition of slavery.
Wow. And how are we still letting this court do anything like
right?
It's based on so much bullshit.
Like Jim Crow is another example of that. The drug war is another example. The over-policing of black communities and using the statistics that come from that to justify continuing those practices. All of that is a part of critical race theory, and it's essentially so there is a permanent underclass, and because if there's not a permanent underclass, capitalism collapses. And
you're already understanding critical race theory way more than any of the Republicans who hate it so much. Like, they don't know what it means. Like, at all.
They think it's like
considers race to be real. They're like, oh, it's critical race theory.
They think it's akin to like,
to be real, but like,
yeah, they think it's similar to like 5th grade social studies when you learn that the Civil War is what ended slavery. Like, that's what they think critical race theory is, or that
anything that acknowledges that racism plays a role in society they're like, that's critical race theory and it's wrong.
It's like, it's criminal that people don't know anything about the KKK. It's criminal that people don't know anything about why the Civil War started, why it ended, what Juneteenth is, like the Tulsa Massacre, all these events. Like, a lot of people I've heard, like, if you ask them who Woodrow Wilson is, they go, oh, it's the guy during World War One, and, you know, that's all they really have to say about him. What they don't know is that he's responsible for the second wave of the Ku Klux Klan. Like, the KKK was basically dead at this point, and I think it was a movie called The Birth of a Nation came out, and it's the first movie ever screened at the White House under the Wilson administration. And it's the modern interpretation of, like, cross burnings and all this stuff. It's a movie about and glorifying the KKK. And
oh my God,
when he screened it at the White House, it legitimized the KKK in a way that it was able to find a rebirth and reform itself in the image of the way it was portrayed in that movie.
Wow, good thing we have nothing like that happening today.
Yeah, Woodrow Wilson is credited as being one of the worst and most evil presidents of all time.
Yeah, I believe it.
At least in the academic circles, in American views, it's like people don't really know anything about him.
Yeah, that's the thing that does frustrate me is, like, all this information, it is out there, I will say, but, like, a big part of my radicalization was going to college, and that's so gatekept by literally just money.
Yeah.
That, like, that's what's so frustrating. I don't know. And, like, when is that knowledge going to trickle?
When will it trickle down?
Like, shit, you got me.
No, because I was just about to say all that goes back to Reagan.
Yeah. I'm just like, what is going on there with, like, the fucking, all my, like, professors in college, for lack of a better word, like, are woke. Like, they were, and not, like, perfectly, you know, like, there were a lot of issues still, but, like, overall, people discussed race as a genuine, like, racism plays a role in society and negatively impacts people. That was something that is not going to be questioned. That is, like, an obvious fact. And, like, there's a lot of classes that go into the history of it and, like, all this stuff. And, like, being a leftist already from high school, I already believed that, but, like, it really reinforced a lot of my beliefs, like, how deep it is in history and stuff like that. And I'm just like, yeah, like, why is the public school system so far behind all that? And, like, I think part of the problem is the fact that leftists are kind of sitting around waiting for the revolution.
Yeah.
When, like, low-key, groups that are trying to affect things now are, in a way, kind of doing more, like, than people who are sitting around, like, when is the revolution gonna happen? Like, you know, I don't know, because, like, we need to be out there, like, getting mad right now and getting shit changed, because, like, nothing is okay. And I think that people feel hopeless and people feel like everything's set in stone. And that's what bothers me the most, is that you try to talk to people about stuff and they're like, well, that's how it is. And it's like, we made it that way and we can change it. Like, everyone feels so powerless, and that is part of the problem.
It's interesting that you bring up education, because it's kind of designed that way, because it's shown that, like, statistically on average, people who have received a higher education typically have higher critical thinking skills and have a better understanding of complex problems. And so generally they will be a little bit more progressive leaning, because, I mean, being real here, like, progressive policy and all that aligns with the objective reality of history way more than whatever conservatives are saying, because, you know, like, conservatives being like, this plane crashed because of DEI, like, that, they're just saying stuff, and it doesn't align with objective reality. And so, like Reagan is the reason why universities cost so much money, and it's because he erased legislation that prevented that from being the case. Like, student loans are on average about 4 times more a year now than they were before he took office. As the governor of California, he was very harsh towards universities like UCLA and like Berkeley and stuff.
Yeah.
And like Bush with the No Child Left Behind policy. Republican think tanks are very aware that the more you have an educated population, the more they're going to question it when you're making the argument for taking people's rights away or increasing prices on stuff and blaming it on inflation and not blaming it on billionaires being greedy.
Right.
And so when you tell people like the top 500 corporations in America like almost doubled their profits in 2022 despite arguing they needed to raise prices because the cost of materials were going up and wages were going up. Yeah, like people hear that though and they're like, I don't know what profit means. And it's because they weren't paying attention in their half-assed econ class that barely explained it. And they probably couldn't afford to go to college. So they never learned beyond that. And I think the reason the progressive movement has grown the way that it has is because of the internet. We've basically handed people like a digital library of encyclopedias that most people can access.
Alternative perspectives.
It's why the right wants to get rid of public libraries so much, because it's free access to books, free access to computers most of the time, which inevitably means free access to the internet, which is an endless treasure trove of information.
And have you heard of the legislation they're trying to pass in Florida to like keep kids off the internet?
Yes.
Oh my god, it's so clearly like trying to keep them away from like alternative ideologies.
Yeah,
like you have to believe what you're taught in school basically, which is going to be that America's the best. Like they don't want them to find out that America's not the best.
Like TikTok being banned. Like there's a reason why there's bipartisan support for that. And it's because the people on TikTok have gone so far beyond the like even liberal perspective that like even Democrats are getting worried, because it's why like the movement against Biden in this current election was so strong. And I think that freaks the Democratic Party out. It's probably why they chose Tim Walz, because Kamala Harris is already a slightly more progressive candidate than even Biden, which is kind of wild because Biden is very pro-labor, at least more pro-labor than like Obama or Clinton. And
I'm so happy to hear that, because like it almost legitimizes. There's so much about the changes that have happened in the last like 20 years that it's felt like mainstream society tries to almost deny. There's this really almost creepy feeling of like going to the mall and like seeing these department stores that look the exact same as they always have, but no one's in them.
Yeah.
And like just everything looks like visually really similar to how it has for the past like 20 years, but feels incredibly different. And we know everything's different and we know that everything's changing, but it's like they've been trying to save face and just keep this like image that everything's fine and everything's the same. Yeah. So I don't know. I'll have to like research this new like VP pick or whatever.
Yeah.
But if he is like that progressive, that is finally a fucking external sign that they're hearing us. And like I know they've been hearing us. Like we know they've been hearing us, because like even the BDS like boycotts of McDonald's have been having an impact, and like they do everything in their power not to talk about this stuff or acknowledge it or validate it in any way. But it is doing something, and like I think it's just so important that people feel that power, because like people underestimating their power is such a huge part of the reason why nothing has changed yet. Well, I say nothing. Things are changing. Many great things are happening as well as many evil things. But, you know.
Biden is the first president to attend a picket line. He, after the train derailment fiasco and Congress voting to not give the railway workers their demands that they were asking for during the railway strike, because the government was like, you can't strike as a federal employee because legally they can't, which is bullshit. But Biden like quietly went behind the scenes and made a deal with them. So now railroad workers on the federal level have sick days. which
Oh,
is what
hell
they were
yeah.
asking for. But he did it like months after the fact behind closed doors and never publicized this, which is really weird. He showed up to the picket line for the auto strike. Apparently, the person behind that move was Kamala Harris,
Hmm.
which is what made me a little bit more hopeful for her because she seems to be one of the more progressive senators to come from California, which is a really weird sentence to say. Her biggest weak point is immigration. Tim Walz is known for giving every kid in Minnesota free lunch, especially during summertime.
Whoa.
He's a big advocate for the lunch program. Someone tweeted out this video where he signed that bill and was surrounded by like school children, and it's like one of the most uplifting and hopeful videos I've ever seen. Like most like bill signings are kind of lame and they're kind of just like, yeah, I get it. It's like a photo shoot. This dude, like, I mean, they love him up there. He's really popular in the Midwest. He's really popular in Minnesota. He is seen to be electorally beneficial to Wisconsin, but like he has the child lunch bill. I believe he has a slightly more progressive stance on Israel. The original person we thought they were going to pick was Josh Shapiro, and he's the governor of Pennsylvania. And in the last week, he has said horrible things about the IDF. He has basically shown unequivocal support to the IDF.
Holy shit.
It was unearthed that he is involved in a sexual harassment cover-up.
Not surprising at all.
Yeah, he's also a bit of a wet blanket when it comes to the wider electoral college. Like, he would not resonate well with people in the Midwest. I think that someone like Tim Walz is so down to earth, seemingly, that like it kind of seems like they've got it in the bag with him.
I'm
Somebody.
excited to look more into that and see what his whole deal is. I just like, it's like, how can we get past the two-party system? Nobody likes it. Like, no one I talk to feels like they have any say. It's insane. So I'm just sick of it. But yeah.
I've theorized that if we pushed the Democratic Party so far into the way that Democrats used to operate when they were called New Dealers, it was where they were very progressive on economic policy. They basically upheld any federal program that was created by FDR, defended Social Security to the teeth, were big Medicare supporters and all that. Basically pre-Reagan, pre-neoliberalism Democrats. I've always said that if the Democrats were pushed back into a New Dealer mindset and we had a more robust progressive wing of the Democratic Party, you would see a split off where people like Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema and Democrats who are more so moderate in the American political spectrum, if they split off and formed their own liberal party, then we would have the far-right conservatives, the moderate liberals, and then the progressive left. And we would at least have then 3 parties in the country to some extent.
Yeah.
I don't know though. Like
I mean, that would be, I guess an improvement. But yeah, the whole like idea of just like having this state that, but you know, like that's my thing, like that has power over everyone and like can tell you, I don't know, and just has that extreme weight of like colonization on its back, and it is an extreme weight on most people because so much of the law just like is not like for a good purpose. Like you were saying, like there's so much like intentional malice behind what the government has done, and like a lot of the laws are intentionally to keep people out. And like, you know, pretty much, even just for example, like food stamps or something, and people want to have all these tests and all these ways to like decide who deserves food.
Yeah.
And to me, it's like, everyone deserves food. Hello? Like, which just brings us back to the whole thing where it's like ideology has to change. People need to see people as people whose behaviors are cause and effect and not just like sin or valor. You know, like,
Yeah.
we have to move past these super ancient ideas more into like seeing people as human beings who like getting rid of this idea of like deservingness at all. Because like all you'll do, this is what I see liberals do a lot, is like this mindset of like exceptions and like, okay, well, if we change the law to where like more people get food stamps, like we'll just have to make sure these people don't get in.
Yeah.
And like we'll just have to make sure it doesn't go to addicts or something like that. And there's
And it's
always
like,
this like moral exception that's like disgusting to me. Like,
yeah.
how are you going to like just pick people out that like don't deserve food? Like, what's wrong with you?
And they're acting like food stamps are being used to like buy heroin. It's like, that's maybe like you're always gonna have bad actors in any program. Like that's just gonna happen. Like there are people that impersonate dead loved ones and collect social security checks on their behalf that like and abuse that system. There are people that sell off EBT in the state in exchange for actual money so they can go buy like alcohol or something. But that's so few and far between, and to deny such a large chunk of people that have nothing but just good intentions or nothing but just the will to survive, to deny them like them being able to afford one meal is so insane to me. Like I saw in response to Tim Walz signing that bill, someone said, yeah, now kids that have like doctors or lawyers as parents are going to get free meals too. And I was like, they sure are. I'm like, who cares? Is like, so what if the doctors and lawyers kids get free meals, the poor kids should starve to death? Like,
I know. Why
God forbid
it's not even costing like a penny in the bucket compared to like the military budget. So if you're really that worried about where your money is going, like
we don't blink an eye when it comes to paying for missiles that are being fired at indigenous people halfway across the planet. But like, oh, but some doctor's kid is gonna get a free lunch. Like, please, God forbid. And I hate this whole like, oh well, this group of people might get benefits from this, so we should deny it to everybody. I've seen that argument with healthcare where it's like, what about the people that want to abuse the system? And it's like, what do you even mean by that? Like the people that might be hypochondriacs, because we already have systems in place to stop that from happening. And
I'm so ready for people to stop thinking in terms of exceptions, because like even disability rights wise, like at the workplace, you're saying like, you know, certain people need extra breaks and they're like, I get tired, I get fatigued, like I'm gonna need to take extra breaks. And they're like, well, if we give it to you, then are we gonna have to give it to everyone else? Or we're gonna need a doctor's note and like all this stuff. So much government shit works on like that kind of principle where it's like, who gets the exception? Who doesn't deserve it? And it's like, give everyone the right to take a little breaky poo. Like that is okay. Like everyone deserves to say like, I need rest.
But what if somebody
give it to everyone? Most people won't need it.
But what if somebody with legs? What if somebody with legs uses the disability ramp? No.
Right, and it's like, you know, they just freak out over like keeping the certain people out, and it's like, here's the other thing is with disability rights, like if you decide to deny everyone except someone with a diagnosis these accommodations, you're still denying people who need those accommodations, you know, who just don't have a diagnosis.
Yeah.
Which is oftentimes people of color or people from different marginalized groups that don't get diagnoses as easily because they'll literally be misdiagnosed or written off by doctors. And like, you know, why are you trying to get like institutional approval when someone who has agency is telling you I need this thing? Like, why would you not? And you know, even if someone lies, like just that's their life. They have a reason still.
And people,
if they're lying, there's still a reason.
Yeah.
I don't know. Even if you would consider it bad, like everyone's been through different shit. Just like, I don't know. And this desire to like monitor and control everyone in this like super moral way. I'm sick of it.
And people that like, people also don't take into account like the quality of care between different demographics. Like as a white guy, I'm way more likely to receive an accurate diagnosis and proper treatment than like a white woman or anyone that's a minority, because like statistically you're way more likely to die during childbirth if you're a minority. I've heard from people that will like go to the doctor who are women, and it's a woman related issue, and they get a male doctor who dismisses them and is like, you're fine. Like,
I know, I've heard that so many times. Yeah.
Like Rory has that kind of story. She went to the doctor for something that was like a problem that only a woman would have, and her doctor was a guy, and her doctor was super rude to her, was like, you're fine. All the nurses were appalled at the way that he spoke to her. He like wrote her a prescription for like painkillers and was like, you're pretty much fine.
Oh my God.
Little does he know that like she probably isn't fine and probably has issues that I've heard a lot of women have, an issue that like, because I don't want to say it on here, but like an issue that I know that my mom has had before, and she's had to have like surgery for it. And so that made me worried, because I'm like, well, what if she needs surgery for this? And these male doctors that are like, oh, you're just cranky, or oh, it's probably just your period. Like,
exactly.
I don't understand why, and you know, I just don't get that. I don't get why that's the case. But like, you know, then when jobs are like, you need a diagnosis for this, it's like, you know how many times you have to go to the doctor and how expensive that gets over time to get a diagnosis for something?
Oh my God, that's so true. It's a class gateway as well as all these other things we're mentioning. Like, it's all these policies that like liberals want to be like, who deserves this thing? Just the answer is always everyone who asks for it. You know, like everyone who asks for it deserves it. Like, you don't need to be doing this whole like testing, like trying to get approval. Because like, here's the thing: a doctor is not better than an individual.
Yeah.
A doctor, like, they are wrong all the time, and I'm always going to them and they're always telling me I'm just anxious or whatever. Like, they're not higher than any other human being. They think they are. But like, so why are you saying to someone who's sick, if I come to you and I'm saying like, I didn't come to work yesterday because I was sick, and you're saying, no, you weren't? Hello? Like, that's not something we should be accepting the way we're accepting right now. Like, that shouldn't be something you can say to somebody. Like, if I say I was sick yesterday, you should be like, yes, ma'am. Like, okay, because why are we in this, like, super doubtful state as a society? Like, we're so mistrusting of each other. I mean, as we know, like, since the fucking stranger danger shit, it has just gotten worse, and people have gotten more alienated and more afraid of each other and more distrusting of each other. And it's inhuman. Like, we, you know, even when I taught English in France, people over in like the sort of small town I was in France, they're so much more like natural human. Like, if I'm sick, they're gonna say, oh my God, I hope you get better, you know? And I was used to America where it's all like, no, you weren't, you know, you should have come to your shift, like you're lying, and like there's just this automatic distrust that's so unhealthy. Like, I think it's genuinely part of why we're so sick in America sometimes, because like the loneliness, also the stress, like all these things that we don't talk about enough, like those have major impacts on your body. But anyway, yeah, the people in France would be so understanding and human about it. Just like, yeah, of course, like you need to stay home when you're sick. Health before work. You know, and it's like, that's so obvious. Like, that's so obvious.
Well, you know,
here
like,
we are trying to like regulate the shit out of everything so that like no one gets away with anything. It's like, why do you think everyone's this like criminal?
Yeah. Well, you know, like in America, we're paragons of good health. We have the most unhealthy food on earth. We have little to no access to medication or treatment. We have workers' regulations that aren't adequate enough, so we get exposed to toxic chemicals and toxic waste all the time. Half the products we consume have like lead in them or have some kind of chemical in them. We're the only country that allows the amount of chemicals in our food that other countries don't. You know, from what I've heard, that there's so many chemicals in Pop-Tarts that they are virtually a completely different product in England.
Too. I wonder if it's true.
It's like the food dye that they put in Pop-Tarts here is not in Pop-Tarts in the UK.
It's just like rat poison.
like Red 40, the thing that makes like Mountain Dew Code Red, like that's illegal in a lot of countries. Like you're just not allowed to artificially dye your stuff red like that.
But there's no profit in regulation.
And like recently, major companies that have a lot of market share in this market, pads and tampons, were recently discovered to have a lot of lead in them.
Yeah, I heard about that.
Like I think like Tampax is the biggest one that's been caught so far. And I'm like, what?
I know, it's wild. It's wild.
What is the point of the lead? Why is there lead in it? Like,
what is the point of the lead?
I would love to hear the justification for why there's lead in pads.
With tears in your eyes.
And like,
what is
why is there lead? Well, like, there's organic pads that I've seen that have no lead, and I'm like, what is the difference between what that one's doing and what the other one's doing that makes the lead better?
I don't think they're putting it in to make it better.
Is it just like a cheaper material to make it out of? Like, why is lead not outlawed in this country yet?
I know. I haven't looked into what actually happened with the lead. I had heard... Okay, I mean, there's just so much information. I really don't know what's true, but I had heard that it's like a lower amount than people were making it out to be. Not that that makes it okay. It's still, there should not be lead in our fucking tampons. Like, I don't care, but like, I did hear that it was a little bit overblown. I don't know though. Please correct me if anyone knows, but maybe I'll look into it.
You know,
but yeah, it's not profitable to regulate things.
You know, it's so I have two things. One is that car batteries contain lead, and that when you throw out your car battery, it is taken to a disassembly plant right over the border in Mexico, where there's no regulation on this stuff, and they disassemble it there because it's illegal to expose your workers to that much lead.
Wow, that's so fucked up.
But it's not illegal in Mexico. Maybe that'll change now that they've just selected a slightly more progressive president there, but for right now it's still illegal. And the second thing is that it's a very popular belief amongst historians that the reason the Roman Empire fell is because they were consuming so much lead. When you have high lead consumption, it makes you super irritable, and you're way more likely to like blow up and be like angry all the time. It makes you kind of go into like psychosis after a while. And the Roman Empire used to like season their food with lead. I mean, that's how much lead was like embedded into their society, because they didn't know that it was toxic. Like, lead being toxic is a relatively new discovery within the last 100 years. Right. So, and it's rumored that the Roman Empire fell because of so much lead consumption, that it drove them all mad.
You know, I did not know that about the Roman Empire. That's so interesting. And it also kind of ties to, I heard the same thing about boomers. Have you heard that theory?
Yes.
Like, of course,
because of leaded gasoline.
Right. Like, but part of it is, of course, like trauma from like world wars and like having parents that were had PTSD and like the trauma that causes
in Vietnam,
but also the fact that they had so much lead that they're lead poisoned, and that's part of why they act so fucking crazy. So like some combination of like CPTSD and like and lead, it kind of adds up, because like the way they act is like beyond just like, I don't know, like being old and angry. It's like so irrational.
Yeah.
To the point where it's like, hello? And like you can see, I think I read that like part of lead poisoning is like swollen fingers. Like you can see a lot, especially like the men for some reason. I don't know. You can see like their fingers are swollen. It's wild to think like how many times throughout history there have just been like widespread things that are normalized that are affecting us in that way. I am sure we're dealing with some of that right now with our sleep hygiene, with our social practices at the moment, which are very lacking um, with everything. Like, I'm so curious. Oh, who's that? Who's that?
I just looked up lead paint stare. Yeah, have you ever heard of that? You ever heard of the lead paint stare?
Like, vaguely remember that. I totally recognized it.
Because there was lead in gasoline, which was being released into the air supply. There was lead in paint. There was lead in pipes. And so it's kind of like theorized that the reason why so many boomers stare at you like this is because they just have so much lead poisoning. It's kind of nuts.
God, I shouldn't laugh, but like they're so mean.
Yeah.
But no, I don't know. I'm not with the generational divide shit because like there are good people in every generation. But yeah, they are so mean. So mean.
There's I'll send that to people occasionally, but I'll send the cat version.
That's so funny.
But so yeah, like I actually talked about that on a recent episode where I was like, it's weird that like the boomers did it and now Gen X does it. And it's weird how a lot of Gen X will attack Gen Z despite being their parents in a lot of cases. I'm like, I don't understand this weird generational thing where like there's obvious in America at least, because all of this is American based. There's different generations in different countries.
True.
But in America at least, it's like there's a clear difference between people that grew up in the transition to neoliberalism right after the Vietnam War, and then people who grew up in the 90s during the technology boom, then people who grew up in the war on terror and the financial crisis, which is where I grew up, and then the newer generation who all have access to technology at a moment's notice and have access to the entire wealth of knowledge that we have now, but they're almost kind of dependent on it. We're starting to see, and it's causing like major issues.
Right, and we're also socially isolated at the time of their psychosocial development, which is interesting to see because like people are talking about the noticeable differences in like going to concerts and stuff like that because like
yes,
the vibe is totally different now. And like I said, part of that is long COVID, but I do think part of it is the social vibe with, I'm thinking like teenagers. The social vibe with teenagers now is very strange to me. And I'm sure that happens like every generation, but like it strikes me as like just really uncomfortable and like socially neglected, which is really tragic because like everyone deserves love, everyone deserves support, and like they just seem very alienated and like scared.
Yeah,
they're very like nervous, like super
anxious.
nervous.
Yeah,
even like Gen Z is a little bit more like daring and bold than like the current like teenagers, I would say.
From what I've read, it's because of during our developmental years, we had to watch our parents go through like immense financial struggle, and seeing your guardians, the people who are supposed to like teach you about life and are supposed to be the most wise people you know, panic and do it very visibly and not really hide it from you. And then all of a sudden now you're moving. Like I moved to where I live now because of the financial crisis. And so it's said that had a psychological impact on Gen Z. So we're more lax about serious stuff, and we make fun of stuff as like a coping mechanism more often.
Oh, that's really interesting.
And that we don't really respect authority in the same way that like I guess that like millennials might, or that Gen X definitely does.
That's a huge thing I've picked up on.
Yeah. And
like even me, like as much as I hate authority, I have always masked. I have always lied. I've always tried to not get in trouble. And when I see Gen Z standing up and like saying some shit, like when I got my master's degree, I had some classes with like the undergraduates. And so they're a little younger than me, you know? And in class, they would say shit to their professors that I would never dream of saying. And I was like, loving it. I was like, oh my fucking god, like this is so cool. Like, and why haven't I been able to find that like power within myself? So that's really interesting. I wonder if it did have to do with that, like seeing authority figures struggle and just being like, you know,
I
they're
think
not
that's
as all
it.
powerful. Everything is like not as unshakable as people
Yeah.
think.
I think that's it. I think it's also Gen Z like to push the rules to the extent where they're basically like, this system has never been tested before. Let's push it well beyond what it's like capable of and watch it break. So like a few years ago, GameStop stock, where they like shot it way up to an unimaginable value and then just sold all at the same time and like dropped it. And that caused such a alarm to go off in the stock market that they closed that stock, which they're not supposed to do. Robinhood, which was like a popular trading app at the time, pretty much doesn't exist anymore because they restricted people from being able to sell and effectively let their stock like basically deplete itself into nothing. And so
I remember that happening.
yeah, and it like killed their company because they were like, wait, we can't let not rich people game the system like this. Put an end to that. And it like killed their entire company.
That was so iconic. You know what I could compare it to in terms of like psychological development? It's almost like the phase that children go through that, like, okay, rather than like an individual child to their individual parent, it's Gen Z to authority figures in general.
Yeah.
It's like that stage where you're almost pushing it to see like, how much autonomy do I have?
Yeah.
Like, how much can I push this? Like, how much power do I have? Let's find out. Like, let's punch and find out. Like, which is wild to me. I don't know why I felt so. I'm 28, you know, and so I'm like, I don't know, like Zillennial or something like that. And
you're a Gen Z, I believe.
I'm what?
You're Gen Z, I'm pretty sure.
I'm 1995.
I think the cutoff is 94, so I think you made the cut.
I'm in the club. But yeah, like I'm kind of like culturally definitely like I can see elements of both in myself. But anyway, like growing up, I was super like conforming to what people wanted me to be, and I had a ton and still have a ton of fear of like not living up to the expectations of authority figures as much as I hated them and disagreed with those expectations. And I don't know, some of this is me, but I can see it, like you're saying, like Gen X and millennials like having that. And so yeah, I don't know what, that's so interesting. I am excited to see what Gen Z does. They're very inspiring to me. And I know it's probably annoying to hear because it's like, y'all bitches were too fucking chicken to like stand up and change shit, and now we're having to deal with the brunt of it when you guys should have done it. And so it's like, it's not like I get to just be like, oh, I stood by, you know, and now Gen Z gets to take care of everything for me. Like, I want to be there. Like, I need to step up. I need to do my own shit. But seeing them, and even like I said in college, hearing people speak up to the professors, I was like, yes. Like, it just like, it's so satisfying to see and hear, and just like emboldening. It like, it's contagious. Like, you see people doing it and you're like, wait, they're right. Like, we can talk back. We can fucking fight back. And like, I'm so excited. But hopefully these nervous teens, like, I don't know, don't get too held back by kind of this like anxious energy they seem to have.
I think another thing that makes Gen Z so willing to do this, I think what it is the way that we kind of semi grew up along technology. I am older at heart than I am actually when it comes to this topic. I've been using computers since I was like 6. And I think what it is like, I think Gen Z has realized that they can use technology in a way that like old people didn't anticipate. Like Gen X and boomers, like people in Congress who are like on Facebook when I like, that's what they're saying to these CEOs that run social media companies, and they have no idea what they're talking about. I think Gen Z uses that to their advantage. Like, I think realizing that they can spread information on TikTok like wildfire like stuff that people never even thought about. They can just spread that info. This is the most support for a free Palestine I've ever seen, ever. And there are people that
Yeah.
have been fighting for this for decades who are saying the exact same thing. They've never seen such a large amount of support that Biden, or not Biden anymore, but the Democrats almost have a chance of losing Michigan because there are so many voters there that are not on board with
Ooh,
the
I love to hear that.
with because communities like Dearborn and these large Muslim communities or Arab communities in Michigan, they're big enough to tip a vote like that in Michigan towards Trump just by not voting. And we even saw it in the primary. It was like 45,000 people organized in the matter of 2 weeks to vote uncommitted in the primaries against Biden.
You know what? That's a really good point because, like, when I was growing up, it was this feeling that the internet was this secret place that was totally detached from reality and it didn't have any effect on, like, the real world. Like, it was like you have a secret life, you have a MySpace, you have a DeviantArt, like,
Yeah.
you have, at least when I was in, like, middle school, it was like Facebook and your parents don't know you have it and, like, all this stuff. But then, it was only when I got older that anything started to affect like the real world, and it was crazy to see. Like, it felt like worlds overlapping. It felt so strange as a millennial, like, to see that change happen. And I think kind of along the lines of what you're saying, like, it's Gen Z has more like during their developmental stages seeing the effects that it can have and like felt empowered by that. Like, here's this thing that I understand that I'm seeing a congressman not understand in public, and like he's a laughing stock. So, like, of
Yeah.
course I don't respect him, like and I don't need to like bow down to him because like what power does he have in this world where he doesn't understand like the very basic underpinnings of like our current society, like and that of course is going to impact the amount of respect you have for authority and like the sense of empowerment that you have for yourself as opposed to like, and I know like we're not even like extremely different in age, but it still makes such a difference when things are changing so quickly that like when I was growing up, nothing was affecting real life that much. Every once
Yeah.
in a while, sure, like something goes viral, whatever, but like for the most part, it was two separate worlds. And now I still feel that way. Like deep down, I feel like I have a separate self from like my quote unquote professional self. And it was like this split that I had to make. And like there's tons of media about this too. Like I think it's a huge part of the zeitgeist for my age group where like Chance the Rapper saying like, I have to hide the fact that I smoke from my grandparents and like I want to have a relationship with you. I want to have this part of my identity. But then I also have this other part that's like these new things that you guys don't understand. I know
Yeah.
weed isn't new, but like, you know what I mean? Like these are
Yeah,
just
no,
two
I know.
separate worlds that you have to like keep apart from each other. I guess value wise, like, is what I mean.
Yeah,
And like, yeah, go ahead.
I have to like I'm bisexual, so like I have to like hard mask in front of people.
Mm.
I have a somewhat like effeminate cadence to my voice that doesn't sound like super manly or anything as people would mostly view. And so like and I have a lot of like mannerisms that I do that would give me away a little bit. And so like
Mm-hmm.
if I'm talking to like someone who I know, like in my family that I know is conservative, I'll lower my voice to what it naturally sounds like. I'll pay attention to the way that I speak. I don't move my hands as much. I have kind of like a voice that I put on that makes
Great
me
guy
just sound.
voice.
Yeah, I have like my straight cis guy voice. Like it's like the hey, I might be voting Republican, like that kind of voice. And I feel like it's because I feel like they will think something's up if I talk like I normally do.
Yes. I think that's like a really difficult thing for our generation to deal with because like so much change has happened so rapidly that just to maintain relationships, like there's this massive tension and you have to code switch. Like you have to. And you have to mask and like then reconciling within yourself these like multiple selves you've created is its own like difficult thing to do. And like I will admit that like mine is worse. Like, and not to be like, oh, I'm special, but like with autism, my specific autism is masking is a massive aspect of it. Most of my journal entries from high school are like, I feel like I have two selves. Like, I even like named them. I was like, there's this girl
Yeah.
who is like this, and there's this girl who's like this, and like, and I would tell my friends, like, I feel like I act so different and like cater myself to everyone so much, and they'd be like, oh, everyone does that. So I was like, oh, okay, it's normal. But then, like, come to find out the extent of what I was doing is far beyond normal. And it's so instinctive that, like, I will say things to people that but were not coming from me. They were coming from only what I thought that person wanted to hear. And I'll think about it afterwards and be like, wow, that was literally like, who was that?
Have you
Um,
ever have you ever spoken to like someone at like the front desk of somewhere or something like that? Like I had this interaction recently, where this has happened so many times, but this is the most recent one. I come into the gym and I wear my crochet beanies a lot to the gym because my hair gets kind of crazy when I'm working
Mhm.
out. And the front desk person is like, "Oh, I crochet too," and we talked for a few minutes about that. And when I walked away, it was like, like it was like this massive weight came off my chest when I was done with the conversation. Like I didn't hate the conversation, but it was like building up a pressure in me of
Oh
like,
my god,
this is not
exactly.
how I usually talk to people. This is also like, I didn't expect a conversation the moment I walked in. Like, although I don't mind talking about this subject, I'm now like having to think of what to say on the fly, which I'm not used to doing. Usually I have to like rehearse what I'm going to say beforehand. And so like after that whole thing, it feels like a performance. And then like once I'm walking away,
Yeah.
it's like this big sigh of relief.
Yeah. I think that's one of the major pains of being autistic because, like, we as human beings, we do need social connection, but we don't get it. Like, I don't know, situations like that, you don't walk away feeling like I really just connected with someone. You walk away feeling like, did I pass? Like,
Yeah.
did,
Did I freak
you
them
walk away
out?
kind of,
Hmm.
yeah, I don't know. It's like, you do get so conditioned to view social situations as something that you're going to fuck up if you don't like monitor your every single move.
Yeah.
At least for me, like that. I mean, and like I said, I'm high masking as fuck, so that's like how I feel in pretty much all social situations. It's just like constant monitoring myself to be like, am I doing this wrong? Am I talking too much? Am I like whatever, whatever? To the point where I do not think about myself. Like I am sitting there thinking, what does that person want me to say? What do they believe? What do they want to hear? You know, and like, my sense of justice is like way in the back, and sometimes it can shout something to me, like maybe, maybe contradict them about that to see to help, to like, for your morals, and like sometimes I can work it in, but my instinct, my number one instinct. So what I'll say if I'm like tired or like whatever is going to be what they want to hear. Like
Yeah.
I am the opposite. You know the people who like when they get tired they get like really rude. I am the
Yeah.
exact opposite of that where like if I get tired, I'm going to be so fake and so nice because that's my automatic response is to
Yeah.
mask. My automatic response is to be fake and say what I think you want to hear. And when I get tired, it's actually really unsettling to be around for other people because the mask gets stronger but weaker in a sense. It's like I pretend harder and I get more scared of messing up, but I'm also doing worse at it because I'm so tired and I'll like make little mistakes and like seem too excited or too nice and laugh at jokes that I didn't hear or like whatever, and my little mistakes become more evident, so like the mask slips and it becomes almost like uncanny, I think, to people,
Yeah.
which is why I'd like to learn to unmask because ultimately it's just not good for me or others.
I have
Well,
to
really good for me.
I usually have to like
It's
tell
not.
people like after a couple times, I usually have to let people know like, hey, sorry if I'm being weird. I just have to get like comfortable before I start acting like me. Um
Yeah.
and like it's really weird. Like this is being recorded and it's gonna go up, but I'm way more authentic here than I am if I was like just talking to somebody random. Like it it's really weird.
Well,
Like
yeah.
I think my brain doesn't process that people are gonna see this. So it's different. You know? Like
Well, it's also the fact that we're both autistic, so we do communicate similarly. Like, it is a breath of fresh air to like have someone who likes to talk the way I like to talk, where like we do take longer turns. Because I just take a long time to like think about what I'm saying and like get it all out the way I want to get it out.
yeah.
Whereas like neurotypicals, it's a lot like of a quicker pass back and forth that I have to like try to keep up with, and I'm always feeling like I didn't get everything out and like all that. Whereas I feel like we can take our time and like really dig into stuff and like not always ask us, and what about you? Because like neurotypicals want you to ask them like directly about themselves. We can do that like parallel conversation style and still feel engaged with. It's
Yeah.
like I said, that like treat others like you want to be treated thing, where like we naturally have empathy for each other, but the way if I talked like this to a neurotypical, they would view it as not being empathetic. Whereas like I at least I hope you're feeling this way too, is that like if you're talking to another autistic person, it's like I like the way that we talk to each other. And it's like we are not I wouldn't view you talking for a long time as like taking too much of your turn. I'd be like, oh, he's being thoughtful in the conversation. And like I appreciate that.
I do like
And
to
like
listen.
neurotypicals are so weird about it.
I do
don't
like
know.
listening more than I like talking, which seems weird that I have a podcast, but like I do genuinely enjoy listening to other people more than I like talking a lot of the time. I'm like generally
Me too.
quiet.
Yeah, well, I guess I shouldn't say me too, because like clearly I am rambling so much. I do like to talk, and I like to externally process with people, which a lot of neurotypicals don't like to do because it requires nuancing each other, which like I think is fun and shows care and shows that you're listening and you want to like discover the truth together.
Yeah.
To be vulnerable enough to say stuff out loud that like you're not sure about, and to like let the other person say like give you more context or like help you think through an issue. Like that's my favorite way to talk, and neurotypicals will not do that with me. And I always try to do it and then like get rejected on that
Yeah.
because they don't want to do it, and like I'm always like, what are we doing this?
A lot of people don't even like think about what anything past what they're going to eat for lunch that day. So it is like kind of hard to talk to them about
Yeah.
like stuff that you'd have to think about deeper. Have you ever
That's true.
have you ever walked away from a conversation with somebody where you feel like you've told them too much about you?
I feel like they feel that, and I'm just wishing that we had like engaged on it because I love when people overshare to me. So I don't regret it usually, but I will realize like, oh, they didn't need all that, didn't want all that information.
Yeah, that's how I feel sometimes. Like I'll be talking to someone and I feel like the conversation's going well, and then like towards the end I start to think, maybe I've said a little bit too much about myself, and then like I get kind of self-conscious about that, and then once the conversation's over I'm like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have told them about this, or maybe I shouldn't have like overshared about this thing, or like,
Yeah.
oh, I said this, it sounded weird but it really didn't. Like,
Yeah, I do that too. And I mean, it sucks because a lot of it is stuff that really should be normal to talk about that for some reason neurotypicals just think is like taboo. Like for me, I mean, I like to talk about my health a lot, which is somewhat taboo for people anyway, but like deeper into that, like sometimes I'll talk about like when my period is coming or something, and I think that should be really a normal thing to say.
yeah.
But to a lot of people, it's not, and I'll walk away being like, "Wow, they thought that was really unprofessional." I can tell they thought that, and like I should have kept that to myself, even though I don't believe that I should have kept that to myself.
I've encountered this where I even encountered it today where someone will like say in my vicinity, like they'll be like, yeah, I think my period's starting soon, and then they'll turn to me and go, oh, sorry, and I'm like, huh, like why? And
I know
I feel
it's
so bad.
normalized in,
I'm like
straight people culture.
yeah, I'm like I feel so bad because I'm like, I don't care about hearing about it, like it's fine. I know y'all do it at least once a month, so
Mm-hmm.
it's not
and
like
the main reason people say that to you is because so many times men have turned around and be like, ew, don't talk about that around me. Because, like,
Yeah.
especially when I was growing up, that was, like, how every man responded. So she's just, like, anticipating that. But yeah, you're like, dude, that is totally fine with me. Like,
Men are bold for that. Men are disgusting.
I
Like,
know the nerve.
I've seen, talked about this before. I'm like, I do swing both ways, but I've had like gay friends be like, that insert straight guy looks hot. And I'm like, I'm not going to lie. If they're not gay, they're disgusting. Like, straight men are some of the most ungroomed, like, unhygienic people I've ever met. And I cannot process it. It's like, but then they'll turn around and be like, ew, y'all bleed once a month. It's like, what?
Hello.
I'm like, dude, have you ever like shaved your ass? I doubt it. Like,
do you even like women? Like,
most men haven't cleaned their ass until they're asked to do a colonoscopy.
True.
So
they're not washing their asses. We know that much.
yeah, these men will be like, oh, like, they'll be in the bathroom for like 30 minutes and be like, don't go in there for a while. I'm like, what are you eating that's causing that? Like,
Wait,
I'm like, oh my God.
Valid. What are straight men eating that they're all shitting like atomic bombs? Like, that's so true.
That's what I'm saying. I don't get it. And I'm like, especially in public restrooms, like in the gym, it's really bad. People, and I know it's because they've like consumed a lot of protein, and that stuff is like detrimental to your bathroom. But like,
oh yeah,
I'll go in there.
Makes sense.
I'll go in there and it smells so bad, and I'm like, how are you not embarrassed? Like, go home if you're gonna do that in here. Like I get it.
Because like women also have a lot of digestive issues, so I'm like, what? Are we just not talking about it? Are men just like making a big deal about the stink just to be like, yeah, my poop is so big and stinky?
I don't understand it. Like, maybe in a way I'm the regressive one. Like, maybe it's progressive to be open about how horrific your diet is, but like, I've noticed that that's just how men eat a lot of the time. Women, on the other hand, are more likely to have IBS and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So in that case, it's just medical. With men, it's like, you don't have to eat Taco Bell every day and consume the amount of beef that you consume. Like, this is why men get beef related cancer far more than women do, because it's all they eat. Like, I don't eat beef anymore, and part of the reason is because it makes you feel like shit, and it makes going to the bathroom really uncomfortable.
Yeah, and guess what? It's not actually related to your gender.
Yeah.
You know, like, men act like eating more beef it's like gender affirming care for them.
They act like it's the only way to consume protein, and I'm like, you've never heard of chicken? You've never drank a protein shake before? Like,
there's a little peanut butter.
Yeah, there's other ways. Yeah, sugar-free peanut butter is perfect if you work out. Like, there's other ways to get protein that I'm evidence of, because I'm gaining a lot of muscle right now and I don't eat beef at all. I'm a big chicken guy. So
you don't have to try, especially in the Western diet, you really don't have to try to get enough protein. Like, it's there already.
Yeah. And
why are we gendering food though? Like, that's so weird. It's
big manly
so
steak. Grog just wants to grill.
Autism be damned. My boy can grill.
I just want to grill. Honestly, though, the most progressive position is the I just want to grill. Like, people that don't pay attention to the culture war, God bless them. They are the ones that just want to grill. Like,
that's so
more power to them, you know.
Oh my God. Okay, we probably need to like shut up soon, but I thought of something else. Hang on. My brain got tired. I'm gonna lose it. Okay. Y'alternative. I want to talk about the sexual tension between conservative culture and leftists. Like, it's not the leftists. It's like, in general, like, alternative people, I think, are getting attracted to, like, you know, the alternative stuff right now. And I just want to know, I just kind of feel like it's one of those, it's like enemies to lovers, where like human beings aren't built to sustain this level of like tension with other people. Like, it's a sign of danger. You know, like in our
Do you-
brains, having that level of like hatred and tension between another
yeah.
group is like dangerous, and it's natural. It's literally like human programming, evolutionary wise. It's like when you have a conflict with someone to want to resolve it. And I feel like there's this almost like literal sexual tension where it's like we all want to like come together. I'm talking out my ass right now. This is just something I've
Well,
been thinking about.
I
Like,
actually have
I want
statistics
to
to
hear
back you
other
up.
people's thoughts on this because I can, it's like in the air. I don't know.
I actually have a statistic to back you up, and I also have a funny thing that I say to people, the conservatives that like to like investigate trans people. I love saying to them, "Why are you thinking about dick so much?" And they go, "No, no, no, it's
Right.
not like that. It's not." And then I'm like, there's a lot of chasers in y'all's movement. Like, I
Yeah.
think there's some up there. But the statistic I have is that you should look into this because it's really funny. Whenever the RNC comes to town, the grinder usage spikes really high.
I
If
actually heard that. Yeah.
it's because staffers and some of the lesser known people in Congress will be looking on Grinder for someone to hook up with.
Wow.
And we've even been backed up by this because what was it, like Milwaukee was where the recent RNC was. Grinder usage like tripled in Milwaukee that weekend or that week.
Wow.
And like the amount of Republicans that have been outed as gay after like being staunchly anti-gay legislation or anti-gay marriage, or like there's one guy that's famous for opposing gay marriage, and then it came out that he like got a blowjob from a man in an airport bathroom and had been arrested for it.
Yeah.
Because it was like it was like public indecency is what he got arrested for, and he got outed for it and like basically kicked out of the Republican Party and outed from Congress because of it.
Yeah. When you live with that much shame, man, Republicans are living with a lot of shame over things they don't need to feel shame about, and that makes for some fucked up situations.
it makes me sad in a way because I'm like, y'all, like some of y'all are married to women and you like men and you hate yourself for it, and it's like I feel bad. And I've noticed this is a big problem amongst conservative men. A lot of conservative women are usually give off the perception that they're pretty straight and are pretty
True.
unwavering in that market.
I think it is a little harder to spot a lesbian though. I think it's a little less like culturally salient, like lesbian like gaydar or whatever. Because women, like everything about women is just less relevant to mainstream society. Like to the point where we're not in touch with stuff like that.
We're still
I might have to do with it.
We're still discovering new things about women's anatomy. Like
Exactly.
There's stuff that we still don't know about, like the woman side of sex and stuff like that. Like, and we're still finding it out now. And like a big one is like the lack of attention on like HPV treatment, and how like HPV basically doesn't affect men at all. The only disadvantage to having it as a man is that then you become a super spreader. And women, on the other hand, can like straight up die from it. And
I get what is it? Cancer on your cervix,
like,
cervical cancer,
like ovarian cancer, cervical cancer, like and we are just now like starting to raise some kind of awareness for that and offering more availability for vaccines and stuff, and trying to explain to men that like, hey, we know it doesn't really affect biological men, but like if you don't want your spouse or your partner to like die, maybe you should get the vaccine and not contract HPV. Like,
crazy idea,
crazy concept. Caring for the women that you're with, crazy idea.
Yeah, so I think that might be why it doesn't seem like it, but I don't know. There's a lot of dynamics there with like gender and power, you know, like obviously I think a big part of it is power and hierarchy and like I don't know, like men, okay, like conservative men who are they pretty much hate women, right? Like we know
Yeah.
this. They're highly misogynistic,
Oh
and
yeah.
if they have a wife or something like that, that doesn't feel super meaningful to them because it's like, fuck this bitch. Like,
It's like
which I know it's not that simple, but it's like they haven't like quote unquote achieved anything because like women are already quote unquote underneath them.
yeah,
So I
in
wonder how much of it has to do with gaining dominance over like another something that they would see as more valuable. And this is not to say that like all these encounters are not based in actually being gay. Like, of course not. I'm just like curious what the dynamics are and like how much of it is like actually being gay, how much of it is, and even like sometimes the reverse, where like when they're super powerful people, they want to role play like being super submissive for like different reasons and stuff like that. And like, I would be curious to know like what the psychology behind that is. I'd be very curious to know. Not that there needs to be psychology to explain like being gay, but like for them who are so against it, like there must
yeah.
be because like they hate it so much that they wouldn't do it unless there was like a serious reason.
I
You
think
know
it's
what I mean?
I think it's probably just upbringing. I think it's like I think it's the end result of a conservative upbringing when the parents you have are already pretty homophobic and very conservative. And I think it's this thing where, like, at some point you're going to discover that you're gay. But if you're raised
Right.
that way, you're going to suppress it and you're going to have some form of self-hatred where you're like, why am I like this? I shouldn't be like this. My parents have told me this is wrong. Stuff like that. And then as you get older, it's like you start to resent it because you feel that way, but you know you shouldn't based on the way that you were raised, and
Right.
you start to project that onto other people. I feel like that's what it is, and
Yeah. And
and
in our society, shame is so associated with sex
yeah,
that unfortunately, like, I'm not sure if I like completely understand the dynamics behind this, but I do feel like there's a powerful link between like shame and sex where like anything you feel super ashamed about, you're gonna get like turned on by.
yeah.
I don't know, there's like some kind of link between those
Shaming
things
kink.
that like yeah, like I think shame is super, super associated with that. But yeah, I am curious. And also on the same topic of like the sexual tension, I feel like, I feel like, wait, you know what? I don't know if I can say this anymore. Because like, as I've gotten older and like present myself in kind of a different way, I get different responses. But when I was younger, oh, it was pedophilia. Never mind. I was gonna say when I was younger, I got hit on by like a lot of like conservative men, and I looked like visibly alternative, not like super to the extreme or whatever, but like to the point where you would think they wouldn't think we would have anything in common, but like they don't care about that. But it's almost like, oh, goth GF, like I don't know,
Yeah.
sexualize her. And there is this like cultural tension that I don't know. It's interesting. But yeah, looking back, I'm like, wait, at that age, it was pedophilia.
I've seen that a lot. Yeah, I've heard a lot of stories, and it makes me so sad how common this is. Like 9 times out of 10, the woman you're talking to has a story like this, like what you just
Oh
described,
yeah,
where older
totally.
men.
Everyone I know, like all the women I know, like definitely had whether it was like video chats on Omegle or
Oh
like
my god,
hookups,
yeah.
yeah, all that kind of stuff.
Or like
Um,
kick was a big problem back then. Or
yeah.
yeah, oh my god, Omegle. I know that they just shut that down like a few months ago.
Oh, did they?
Yeah, it's already been replaced with something else, but Omegle
That's
itself is
wild. A
gone.
pillar of the internet.
I know. I'm surprised I never encountered anything like horrific on there.
I
Um,
only did the chats, and it's a very weird situation where like I definitely got preyed on, but it was like people I actually had a connection with, which I know sounds fake. I know that sounds like, girl, you were getting groomed. But it was autistic people that I was having conversations with that I wasn't able to have with people in real life. And like I don't know, like I miss it in a way, but like it was definitely predatory
I
at the same time. So
I I feel like
hello?
I feel like objectively they're wrong for doing that.
Yes.
But at the same time, your own experience with it, like even if it was objectively wrong, you personally
My
don't have an issue
experience-
with it looking back.
Yeah, it's
But
one of those weird things, and I think there's a lot of situations like this where like, why are we prioritizing the predator's perception? You know, it's like my perception of it also matters, and my perception was that I was feeling out my autonomy as a teenager and figuring out like what I could do. Now, obviously, not every situation was as good as that.
yeah.
Luckily, I didn't go on the video chat.
Oh yeah. Oh my god.
Yeah, there's a lot of bullshit.
There's a lot of people that should be in jail right now because of the video chat.
Exactly. Like that shit is disturbing.
That's why it shut down, was because of the mounting like legal stuff with it.
Yeah. At least like most people I know like knew if you were going to Omegle, like that's what was gonna be there. Like no one I knew was like, oh, let's go to Omegle just to like chat with people.
Our interest is Minecraft, and oh my god, there's your balls.
Yeah, exactly. It's like I know I'm gonna see balls. It's Omegle. Which is awful. Like that's actually awful and evil, but like that's what it was. But yeah, I don't know. I do just think there's sexual tension between like in the culture war. In the culture war, there's like sexual tension. I can feel it. But I can say as a woman that like as I've gotten older, I have noticed such a drastic difference in getting hit on, because like when I was fucking like 17 to like 22, and honestly younger than that too, like probably 12 to 22, I'm getting honked at, I'm getting hit on in stores,
yeah.
I'm getting like everything. And then as soon as I turned like 23, it was like everyone, never mind. You know, it's like,
isn't there a Taylor Swift song about that?
Maybe. I actually don't know.
I think she
with music past
from
like our song.
What I remember, I think she did like a sequel to the 22 song where she's like, nobody likes you when you're 23 or something like that.
Oh my god.
But
that honestly is true. Like it's true.
Like, I've been hanging out with people before where like in front of all of us, somebody will like drive by and whistle or like catcall in some way.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what is the goal there other than just being a freak? Like, in my own neighborhood. I
personally believe it truly is like intimidation. Like, there's no like actually
it's
hitting
predatory.
on someone. It's just to be like, you are a woman and you shouldn't be outside in clothes. Like, and that's basically what it is. It's
like predatory, but I think some men genuinely think women like it, and which is like insane. I've never met a woman that has ever been like, I like it when they whistle at me. Like, I've never heard that before. And there's a story I have.
The main reason it's not like no woman is like, oh, I like it, is because it's never just nice. Like, as soon as you are like, oh no, I don't feel like talking, they start threatening you.
Yeah,
like, because it's not supposed to be a nice thing. It's supposed to be scary, and like you notice that as soon as you are like not smiling at them, and they start calling you a bitch. Like
I have a story about that. When I was like a sophomore in high school, me and my now ex were at like a football game or something, and we were going up the stairs on the side of the stadium, and this like boy like smiled at her, and she didn't smile back, and she isn't really like this anymore. At the time, she was very androgynous presenting. If I wasn't with her, many would assume she was gay, which she's bi. So I mean, you know, they're not like technically wrong. But and I'm gonna say what he said. So be a little ready for this one. He got mad that she didn't smile back at him, and he went. He just like scoffed at her and went, "Fucking dyke."
Yo, how about we don't?
I whipped around so fast, and I think it was like everyone that I was friends with was just kind of like, don't. Because at the time I was like really angsty, and I was like, if they weren't there, I probably would have decked him in the face. Because it's not the first time I've heard someone I know be called a homophobic slur. It's also not the first time like I've been called homophobic slurs before. So I think it just invokes this like violent reaction in me where I'm like, I swear.
I know. Actually, I know exactly what you're talking about with that, because like there's so much rage in me that doesn't get a chance to come out on like an actual person because it's all systemic, right?
Yeah.
It's like all these ideologies and stuff like that.
And
I have no one to deck in the face, and I have hella decking energy.
Right?
So, like as soon as a guy like catcalls me and like, you know, is rude to me, I'm like, you don't want to be the target of this. Like,
you don't want the smoke.
I have so much rage.
It's funny, like, because when I think back on that situation, I think, why would that dude hit on her and then immediately call her like a derogatory lesbian slur? Like,
I know, and that's what they do every single time. Like, they hit on you, and then when you're like, "Oh no, thank you," they're like, "Oh, actually, like you're disgusting," and like they go into like everything hateful they can think of.
And it was solely
the lesbian thing is really ironic.
And it was solely based on her appearance too, because me and her were holding hands. Like we were very clearly a couple, and so it was very based on like the way she looked.
Which is so funny because it's like you were clearly just saying you liked the way she looked by hitting on her. So
yeah, and because she gave you the look of "I'm gonna kick in your teeth," you call her a slur, and then I've never seen that kid ever again since then. Like,
this is why I'm not super comfortable with. At the moment, there's like this trend online of sort of going back to like edgy humor, which like in some ways is fun, but like in some ways I'm kind of frustrated with it because one of the ways that it's like being edgy is like ironically being homophobic.
Yeah.
Which like I've seen that a lot, and I'm just like, I don't think we're far enough past that to be ready to do that yet. Which, like, I guess I can't dictate. Like, I'm sure a lot of the people making those jokes are gay, which is obviously fine. Like, of course, but like anyone else, I'm not sure we should be doing that yet. Like, it's been a long. It has not been long enough to do that, and I have felt that way about sexism jokes too. Like, this is something I noticed when I first joined Tumblr. So this is like 2014, and sexism in the early 2000s was on another fucking level. But 2014 was still sexist as fuck. We're still sexist as fuck now. So like, anyway, 2014 I joined Tumblr, and there's a lot of jokes like ironically being sexist, being like, of course I'm not sexist, but like making a lot of like sexist jokes, because I think there's a way in which like people are sexist and they still think those jokes are funny, but obviously they're not acceptable. So it's just like, I'm just gonna make the joke, but the joke is that like obviously this isn't the case because it's not acceptable. And it's like, we're not far enough past it for that to be clear. Like, you're still kind of reinforcing that like on a low level in people's brains, even if it's supposed to be like, oh, of course I would never say that.
Yeah.
Like,
I think it's fine when it's the in-group doing it, like to themselves.
Right.
Like, I think that's generally considered pretty funny, and like they're fine with it, it seems. But it's always like that meme of where Drake is sitting with all the astronauts, and it's like bro thinks he's part of the team. It's like when a straight person then tries to make a gay joke, and then all the gay people are like, who invited you?
You can't do that. Yeah, exactly. Like you said, it's funny when the in-group does it, but then when anyone else does it, it's like, we're not far enough past it. Like,
yeah.
For me, I don't know. And that's another thing where like I would be open to hearing what people think about that. I'm curious, but like I personally, I've just seen that online, going back to like edginess, and I'm sure it's just like another pendulum swing that like swings every couple of years, where it's like, oh, now we're being really careful. Oh, now we're going to be edgy again.
Yeah.
Oh, now we're being really careful. And it probably just kind of goes back and forth that way. But yeah, it's, you know, I've been seeing it.
That's one of those things I've had to really atone with, because when I was growing up, the alt-right pipeline was just getting started. People like Ben Shapiro were popping up, and Joe Rogan was starting to have a right-wing swing. And so like edgy humor was on the uptick. And as like a baby liberal who only knew what my mother had told me because she's a somewhat progressive lib, if not like a full-blown leftist at this point in time, I only knew what she had taught me. Like, I was so libbed, Obama was like my favorite president. Like,
yeah, around that age, I was liberal too.
So
for sure.
But I almost fell down the alt-right pipeline. And I used to be like obsessed.
I think you mentioned that to me before.
I used to be like obsessed with making edgy jokes, and I used to think there was nothing wrong with that. And so like I have some really cringy moments from my youth where I was just being like racist and like not realizing that I would genuinely hurt people with those comments if I ever said it to the people that I was joking about.
Mm-hmm.
And so like that's the only part of it that I like. Thank God I never said a racist joke to a minority's face. Oh my God, thank God I never did that. And like, but I still don't like the fact that I made the joke.
Yeah.
And like,
it's good to look back on that with that perspective. I also think like growing up autistic, it's hard because like you see people's reactions to stuff and you don't always like fully understand.
You become reactionary.
And because you like don't get taboos the way other people do, you think it's funny. And like autistic men especially, I see this happen, but like women too, because guess what I used to do? In the lunchroom when food would fall on the floor, there was such a social taboo around eating food off the floor, and I'm like, nothing's on it, it's fine, and I would pick it up and eat it, and people would be so shocked, and I thought it was so funny how shocked they would be. And as an autistic person, that is a common experience where you
did the exact same thing. I used to do the exact
same
thing.
Too?
Yes, not the food thing.
Funny.
But I used to do gross stuff that people would find gross because I knew it would get a reaction. And so like there'd be like a really gross looking dish that they would serve for lunch and everybody would be like, ew, and I would get it on purpose and then eat it in front of people. And like it didn't taste that bad. But like to them, I'm eating like someone's vomit. Like it's that bad looking.
Yeah.
And people would be like, ew, and I lived for that reaction. And so like with shock, edgy humor, you know, ooh, Hitler, and people would be like, whoa, like I'm getting the reaction.
Only, like, social powers that we had, and it's only when we grow older and get the context for like why certain things are taboo that we're like, some things are taboo for stupid reasons, and so I don't regret joking about that. But like we don't have the context for like what things genuinely needed to be taboo.
Yeah.
And like, so I think it's good that like you grow up and see that, and then now hopefully, if you have any like younger cousins or whatever, you can always tell them like, this is why you don't say that, and so that you can prevent younger people from making the same mistakes. Same sort of saying about like education in Florida and why that's such a problem and everything. Well, education everywhere.
Oh yeah, but like especially in the Bible Belt /South.
Yeah.
So
like kids just need to know the weight of it.
So have I ever told you how I got out of the alt-right pipeline?
I don't remember. I want to know though.
When Ben Shapiro started gaining popularity, he was interviewed by like, I want to say it was either Jordan Peterson or Joe Rogan. Somebody on the right interviewed him, and there was something about the way he conducted himself. I think he is responsible for why some right-wingers at the time stopped being right-wing. It was that he was openly homophobic, unlike the others who used to just dog whistle it. And I was an openly bisexual person at the time, so I took that and was like, whoa, like, what are we doing here? I think it was actually Dave Rubin. I think it was Dave Rubin interviewing him, if I remember right. And he had like just come out with a book or something, and he was promoting it. And it was his view on gay rights, and just, I was also like one of those like Reddit atheist types. So
oh my god, I had that phase. So mine was DeviantArt.
Him being so conservatively religious and so beholden to religious values bothered me so much. And he used religion to justify the homophobia on top of that. And it bothered me so much that I was like, maybe I'm not going about this the right way. And like his voice was agonizing too, like, and the way he talked about stuff, it like completely unraveled me. And then there was a day where there's a video that Hassan uploaded where it was a communist own conservative on college campuses. And I was like, you know, communist was like a big, like, ooh, scary word. And I was like, I'll click this. That video like converted me. And then like the BLM protests in 2020, that radicalized me.
Yeah.
So that like changed my whole worldview. And thanks, Ben Shapiro, for being so nerdy and so homophobic that it converted me back to being left wing.
That is iconic. I love hearing how people have been radicalized. Yeah, during the 2020 protests, that's, I mean, perfect time to become radical.
No, literally, it converted so many people. And it
was huge.
My friend who I talk politics with all the time, he told me his major, he was already going down that path because me and him talked politics all the time. His major radicalizing moment was what's happening in Gaza. And I was like, that's so interesting how these massive events that you can't look away from radicalize so many people. And I was like, the university campus protests from a few months ago, that I feel like radicalized so many people. And so
is that they're seeing fascism like increase right in front of them.
The guy who ran for president going, under me, the feds coming in and gathering up protesters and snatching them off the street like they did during the BLM protests, that would never happen under a Biden presidency. And then like it did happen under a Biden presidency. Like the NYPD, they are trained by the IDF. They employed those tactics on peaceful protesters on the campus.
Yeah. Of course, like I'm older than y'all, and when I was in high school, 2014, well, actually, you know what? I think I became a leftist at that time. I probably became a leftist in like undergrad, which would have been 2014 to 2019, like somewhere in that time period.
Yeah.
And I know for me, like this is, Dan and I always talk about like, he knows a lot more about specific like current events than I do, and I'm a little bit more like fucking floaty, like abstract shit because I am avoidant and I avoid information and things that I know will make me upset, which I know is bad.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at. So like, you know, being on Tumblr is what radicalized me. And it was a lot of just seeing takes that I had always thought that I had just figured were too weird and like I wasn't allowed to have them. But then seeing someone say it out loud online.
Yeah.
Well, out loud, you know, whatever.
The most
I would see a post like, for example, being like, oh, the military like is bad. Like, and everyone I know in real life was like worshiping the military and like,
yeah, same.
You know, thank God for our troops and stuff like that. And I'm all like, I'm thinking to myself, like, what is good about that? Like, what's good about going to another country and like killing people? What makes anyone in America more important than someone else in the world? Like, why are we believing this?
We got to give them freedom.
Yeah, and so I would think that to myself, and not to say that everyone needs to know this shit implicitly. Like, it is totally fine to, like, believe what your parents taught you and unlearn it. Like, I totally get that. But that is one thing that I knew implicitly, mainly just because of being autistic, so I'm not taking all these social cues to, like, worship the military. So yeah. I had the advantage, I had the superpower of not being able to take social cues. And so I wasn't able to like take all these social values I was being handed and integrate them into myself without like questioning them.
Yeah.
And of course I didn't do that with everything, and I still have biases like everybody else, but like there was a lot of shit that I questioned early on, and it was only when I heard it on Tumblr, like heard other people saying it, that I was like, oh my god, this is a valid belief that someone can hold. Like that's amazing. Like I never thought that was possible.
I know.
Yeah, it was kind of like fuck the troops type post, and then like I think that's some of the first shit I saw, and then how did I get from liberal whatever. I don't remember. You get the idea.
Yeah. I know a lot of veterans where like it's to the point where like I view the institution as being the greater evil there, and I feel almost like a sense of just feeling bad for a lot of veterans because they are kind of preyed upon in high school where they may not be making the best grades, and then all of a sudden this military recruiter comes in and goes, "Do you want a trade job? Join the military." And then all of a sudden, like a year later, they're in Afghanistan, and in a part of the world where they don't even know what the capital Afghanistan is, and they don't know who they're fighting, and then all of a sudden we pull out of that region and the region gets retaken over almost immediately. Like, I feel bad for those people because they are kind of preyed upon and kind of groomed into the military.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people who fought in the war on terror or early on have a lot of like trauma when it comes to like, especially once we pulled out of Iraq and then once we pulled out of Afghanistan, a lot of them were having to come to terms with the fact that the war was in vain, that if they lost somebody in the war, it didn't mean anything because
that's traumatizing. Yeah. But
yeah,
I know you're not like trying to downplay this or anything like that, but I do just want to say that like obviously it's so much worse for the people that got invaded and got wiped out, and like, you know, I feel worse for them than I do for like our troops who were being racist and like believed they were doing something good by doing all that, because like I don't know, I just like really fucking hate it. But I also see what you're saying where people didn't know any better, and like what System of a Down said. Why do they always send the poor? Why did System of a Down drop the most like amazing political banger out of the fucking blue the other year? How was that, like 2019? That song is so fucking good. But anyway, they're preying on the poor, they're preying on the disadvantaged, but like I have to admit, like I do just have like a deep part of my core that is like I could never, like, I don't know. Then again, I have a friend who is a veteran and he also like hates the military and everything. And so like it's complex, and I do feel bad, especially for people with PTSD and stuff like that.
I should clarify that I am talking about a very small percentage of people, because there are the other people that join that genuinely just want to murder brown people, and that was the case with post 9/11, was people being like, we're gonna go over there and we're gonna kill all of them, and it's like, whoa, hold on now, like, you know, we can't just go over there and start genociding an entire group of people, like, you know, let's hold our horses, and then there
again, like, I don't understand how people think like all the people in this other country are not just trying to have a good day. Like, there's just country people. Just like actually take a second to think about everyday people living their lives. You think they're waking up every day and going, I hate America. I hate Americans so much. I'm gonna go kill them. You think people are waking up and doing that? Like, that's such a Fox News fucking lie. Like, that is what pisses me off, because I'm like, everyday people have nothing against you. Please, you are not that important to any random ass person anywhere in the world, and they all, like, their lives matter. So
there's a claim that conservatives made like right after 9/11 that there were Muslims dancing on the rooftops in New Jersey that could see the Twin Towers up in flames, and I feel like that rhetoric right there shows just how, like, horrific people are to just generalize.
Like, complex,
like Howard Stern. I've listened to the tapes of what Howard Stern was saying that day, and he just immediately goes straight to, we got to go over there and we have to bomb them, wipe them out. And Robin's over there nodding in agreement, being like, yeah, we should do that. And then like,
wow, that makes more sense.
Yeah, and then what was the other thing that I heard? It was the first hate crime against a Muslim wasn't even against a Muslim, but it was intended to be. It was against a Sikh man.
Wow.
Because someone thought he was Muslim and he wasn't. But it was intended to be that way. So that's the first official hate crime
Oh my god! And
Um,
how are you gonna hate people that you know so little about?
exactly. People see the headdress and they have no idea. They just automatically think, "You're from Iran, aren't you?" Like, there are
Right.
so many places in the Middle East that, and so many different cultures that aren't even Middle Eastern. Like, there's people from India that wear similar
Yeah.
attire. There's people from Pakistan, like from all these regions. People from Turkey, like that. They all
The
aren't like
xenophobia is
that.
crazy. The
Yeah.
xenophobia is crazy, and man, oh my god! Wait, I had something to add. It is getting. We need to shut ourselves up in about 2 seconds flat. But wait, I did have a thought. Oh, it was about xenophobia and not knowing enough about other cultures.
I will make a concerted effort not to add on to this when you say it.
Oh man, I think I forgot it anyway. But basically, along the lines of like, oh no, I remembered it. Okay, okay. I am a little bit annoyed right now with how many people, including like liberals and honestly leftists too, like pretty much everybody in Western culture has this bias where they're only able to see someone's humanity if that person speaks like they do and presents themselves like they do. So
Yeah.
like leftists, a lot of times I see like better representation in whatever like videos and stuff like that. Like and it's always like people from different marginalized groups, but they always speak and act very Western. And I'm like, we're never representing people who act differently from us. And like, I even will hear people like, if I see a video of someone in like Africa who doesn't act Western, like just doesn't have the same mannerisms as us,
Yeah.
and people will act as if that person is like less than human, like not so much insulting them. Like nowadays it's not like sitting there being like, oh, they're like an animal or something, although definitely people think like that, but it'll be more like weirdly like infantilizing or like other things that it's like you can tell they just don't quite think of them as people.
Yeah.
And you can add on to this, by the way. I know this is a big thought, but we'll try to end it after this thought. But but yeah, I just want to get to a point where like Western culture can see someone who acts different from them and still see them as human. And like it's actually wild that that's so much to ask. Like you should be able to see someone who, and when I say acts different from you, I mean literally like comes from a different culture and like does not compose themselves the same way. And like Western culture has this insane, like weird detachment from self, weird detachment from body, weird, honestly, detachment from each other. That is, I imagine, very unsettling for people from other cultures. And I've seen like some reels and stuff of people
Yeah.
who moved here from Africa noticing how, you know, she's like, if I have gone on a work trip with you, we've spent nights in a hotel together, we're friends. How come when I see this girl again, she treats me like we're total strangers still? And she's like, people in America are so alienated and weird about like social things, and like they don't treat each other like friends, and they never become like familiar. And
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my god, I knew on an instinctual level that I was feeling that, but it's so satisfying to hear someone from another culture say that it is that way. And I'm like, I wish Western culture could just like see someone who acts like actually acts like they're from another culture and just see them as a person. Like
I
not need to see them act white to like listen to what they're saying and take them seriously.
yeah. I think this is exactly like it kind of explains why people act the way that they do towards undocumented migrants. And like
Mm,
until they have that citizenship, it's like in their eyes they're less than human. And
yeah,
it's
they
like
want them to
that's
like act white,
yeah, and it's people
even like
like
liberals.
yeah, especially liberals, and which makes me so mad when they capitulate to the conservative worldview. But like, it's like people that are coming over the border because they're trying to get a better life. They've been fed the false American dream, and they think that's possible here. It's
Mm,
people seeking asylum from countries that we've ruined and have now fallen
that's a
into
really good point.
chaos.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
or it's people like escaping from the very prevalent cartel in Mexico, or just anything, like people that just want to come here to work and have a better life for their family, and then like they either are not put into the system on a path to citizenship, which leads to them being exploited in the workplace because legally they have no rights, and if they try to report their mistreatment, they could be deported, and or they're let in temporarily and then kicked out and given no path to citizenship. And undocumented migrants contribute to a large percentage of the economy. So it's insane to me that they aren't offered a path to citizenship.
It is insane. And also, like, Republicans, if you're a Christian, you're supposed to believe in helping a traveler. Like, that was a huge thing about what Jesus said, is helping travelers, helping anyone who's away from their home, and, like, helping them feel at home, making them feel at home, welcoming them, feeding them, all of that. Like, do you not believe in
I think
Jesus
that
is a socialist, so
exactly. One of his best friends was a prostitute. Like, come on, guys.
Right?
A tax collector. But
right.
it's funny, like, a lot of these people think, like, if Jesus ever came back, he'd be strapped with an AR-15 killing minorities.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's like, that's just not how that works. But, so I will say we have destroyed the record for longest episode of this podcast.
Oh my god, nice. I love to yap.
We are 4 minutes away from hitting the 3-hour mark. The previous...
Are you gonna split it up into like parts?
No. It's gonna go as the full thing. The previous record...
what you get.
The previous record was 2 hours and 36 minutes, and it was a live stream. But so this is not only the longest episode, it's the longest recorded episode.
Hell yeah.
Is there anything you would like to plug for the masses?
Oh shit.
Like,
you
so
know,
if you have like a YouTube link, I could link
podcast, it. I imagine y'all are cool, so I'll say you can add me on Tumblr if you want. My Tumblr is if you give the Zeitgeist a sword.
That's sick.
I'm so annoying. I mostly just reblog like funny stuff and like a little bit of political stuff too. So feel free to follow me on there. Otherwise, I don't really have anything interesting to follow. But yeah, thank you so much for having me, Dane. This was so fun. I would love to come back.
Of course.
And I want to hear people's thoughts. I'm sure I was wrong about multiple things on this podcast.
No,
I want to know.
I'm pretty brain rotted. I know most of the stuff you were saying was factual.
Thank you.
I'm brain rotted enough to have that all logged away.
I'm always trying to evolve my belief systems, and none of this is really set in stone. I'm always ready to hear what people think in like different perspectives. So,
well, if you ever open up a YouTube channel, we'll add it to the shared channels and stuff.
Sick. Thank you.
And yeah. So, thanks for listening, everybody. If you want to support us on Patreon, you can do that. And it's pretty cheap. And there's bonus content. If you want to hear my thoughts on the election, there's bonus content for it. Anyways, that's it. We're on every podcast app. And go check out her Tumblr. And yeah.
Bye.
Bye-bye.